I'm so into Facebook.
We're live.
All right, gentlemen. We're
live.
Hey,
we are live. We are so live. Hey guys,
how
are we doing? We are so live. We're almost dead.
You say that every time, and yet we're still here.
I know, because I don't have a better joke. The writers are on strike again. What can I tell you?
No, you know what it is? The checks bounced.
The checks bounce. Yes, because you know why they don't take. Nobody takes checks anymore. They want Venmo. I don't know how to use Venmo.
I don't do Venmo.
I don't even know what that is.
I don't do Venmo. I don't do crypto.
Hey,
you can get in cheap on crypto. You saw it. It's diving, right?
Right now.
$33,000 a share for.
You know that Ardbeg NFT thing is
tanking.
It was like $4,000 when it came out or something like that. Now it's like down to $2,000. So
$2,000 or $2.
$2,000. Yeah.
Oh,
I think.
Too much for my blood.
Of course.
Hey, listen.
Hey,
what we watch when we drink live. And shall we roll the intro?
Let's roll the intro. We'll get rolling.
All right, cool. Let's do it. Welcome to What We Watch When We Drink, a BoozeDancing Entertainment Network podcast featuring lively discussions about movies, TV shows, and anything else that we're watching while we drink our favorite boozy beverages. If you enjoy this show, please subscribe on Apple, Spotify, Stitcher, Google, Audible, and anywhere else you get your podcasts. You can also find us on BoozeDancing.com, and if you have any questions, comments, show or drink suggestions, email us at BoozeDancing@gmail.com. We'd love to hear from you.
So semi-professional, as usual.
That's my life. Semi-professional.
Semi-professional, right? Booze dancing.
Semi-coherent. Semi.
The BoozeDancing Entertainment Network is live. This is like 2 times in a row now. We are live 2 weeks in a row.
I think we call that a streak. Are we on a streak? We're on a streak, right?
Is 2 a streak?
I think 2 is a streak.
I don't know.
2's a streak?
Well, hey, one more. We got a hat trick.
And one more's a hat trick.
That's right. We're not going to talk about sports, though.
No sports tonight. Tonight is no sports.
Don't bring it up.
We are live tonight on YouTube, Facebook, the Twitter, BoozeDancing.com.
Yes.
What else?
That's it.
Right?
Isn't that enough?
And we're gonna turn this little chat thing into an episode of What We Watch When We Drink, our little dog and pony show podcast, right?
Yep.
That'll be coming up. So you guys can, whoever. And you can download this at a later date, so you can do when you're on your 10-mile run one morning, you can just like us, you can listen to us back, right? After we do our 10-mile run.
Yeah, you could put us on and you go to sleep.
That's right. That too, right?
Yes.
So how are we doing, guys? We doing good?
We're doing very good, and we're going to be doing a lot better in a couple minutes.
We are tonight. We are joined. We are lucky. We are very lucky tonight. We are joined by a writer, a researcher, a teacher, a cooker. She cooks. A pet owner. We like dogs. And the director of distillery at Reservoir Distillery in Virginia. Do you know who that is?
That's a lot of people.
Of green room education.
She must be rich from all those titles.
Back it up, bro. Director of Whisky Education.
Oh, Whisky. I'm sorry. Director of Whisky Education at Reservoir Distillery.
Right.
Correct. Yep. She has a brand new book coming out in June. Correct. Who has a book to show the crowd?
Right here.
That's right. Make it a double. Yep. It's all about whiskey, oddly enough, and we like whiskey, so it's perfect for us, right? So we're going to welcome into the show Shelley Sackier. Shelley, are you there?
No, not yet. Hold on. We got to run the intro. And by the way, there's
we have an intro. We have a special intro just for her.
We have a special intro. Now, my understanding is her real name is Shelley Sackier, but to shorten things up, she went with Sackier. So she's going to confirm that. She's going to confirm it.
Yes.
All right. We're going to run it.
Run it.
Hello.
Chloe. Hello. Welcome.
I have to say, I so love that music, that intro music. It makes me feel like I should be pole dancing, as a part of that intro.
That's another podcast we have.
More than anything, I am so excited to be here on your sports show. I can't wait to be talking like sports. That's what I'm prepared for.
Oh, no, not sports.
First time caller, long time listener. Shelley Sackier is there.
Thank you for having me. And I really, Angelo, I think your new name for me is what I'm going to have to craft into my show. I think that's really, really clever. When I was a kid, my last name was Wisneski, which was way too much for anybody to handle. Certainly, a 7-year-old who was just learning how to spell. And I complained to my dad and I said, Wisneski is such an awful last name because not only can no one pronounce it, but I can't spell it. And also it puts me at the back of the line for everything when we're, in second grade lining up to go anywhere. And he said, oh God, I'm really sorry. That's terrible. Actually, we shortened your name on your birth certificate because it's actually Katrina Stanisław Kwasibroga Obstefini Folovikevich. So I did not thereafter. I'm like, I'll go with Wisneski. Wisneski is grand.
See, so they did you a favor.
They did me a favor, sort of. But I mean, Wisneski in Poland is like Smith or Jones here in America. So there just weren't enough Wisneskis where I was growing up.
I gotcha.
Crazy. Wow. Well, thank you for coming in tonight. This is a pleasure. We're excited. We like books. We like whiskey, and you got both.
Yes. I have a lot of books. I have a lot of bottles. And usually the two are always meeting in conjunction with one another. So this is a happy life. It's a recipe for a happy life.
So before we get into the book, let's talk a little bit about you and where you came from to get to this world of whiskey that you are in now. What's your background?
As most people who get into the distilling world, I came into it from the entertainment side of things. So it's just
pole dancing.
Yeah, pole dancing. That was one.
I was going to say it, but I was going to show some restraint.
I did.
She started
a lot of Vegas work, and that is not a lie. Actually, not a lie at all. When I was my whole beginning lifestyle was in our house. You played music first and foremost before your homework. It was everyone played lots and lots of different instruments. We were trained on all the strings and keyboards, and then if you had any spare time and were complaining about being bored, usually you moved on to horns and wind instruments as well. So I did a lot of training of music, classical and whatnot, and then left home when I was about 14, 15, went on the road, and then toured with a bunch of big band swing orchestras, which was my passion, and finished school along the way. And it was a very odd and unusual kind of upbringing where most of my tutors and my mentors were, all the guys from Stan Kenton's orchestra and Harry James orchestra and Frank Sinatra's orchestras. And they taught me how to write, do composition and arrangement for, swing orchestras and write all my charts and stuff like that. It was a very unusual upbringing. And then I got into recording, and then I met the man who was my husband, and he took me to Scotland and introduced me to whiskey, and I became the female doppelganger of the green Mr. Yuck sticker that we all find under our kitchen cabinets on poisonous liquids that we don't want to send our children to drink. Don't allow our children to drink. It was awful, just a really horrific first handshake with brown spirits, and then for the next 25 years, because of one very specific event, which I'm sure we'll get into, over the next 25 years, I sort of traversed from one end of the spectrum right to the other, and went from hating it to making it and loving it and teaching people about it. So that's it. Not so small a nutshell.
So the first one was in the book. It's the Oban 14.
Oban, right. Yeah. Oban was the very first whiskey I had. And I thought it was foul and poisonous and had needlessly dirtied a previously clean glass. I couldn't understand how anybody would drink something like this. I really thought that my ex-husband had lost his marbles. And then what had happened was we were staying in this beautiful country house hotel in just outside of Edinburgh called Balbirnie House, and had just done the tour of Oban and whatnot. And we sat down to have drinks before dinner. And, in some places in the UK, certainly in my ex-husband's world, the world revolved around dinner. So dinner was an event, it lasts 3, sometimes 4 hours long if it's done properly. And you always start, of course, in the library someplace with, a wine Bible that's just biblical in nature, in size. It's just astronomical. And he would bury himself in that tome, and I would be looking about the library for interesting old books, first editions of anything that I could find that was, interesting to read, or just listening to the background sounds of ghosts as they were wandering their way through all these ancient hallways, and watching all the staff, work to make other people's evening an absolute incredible success. So the barkeep for that evening came over and he said, would you like to have a dram before dinner? And my husband at the time, he rolled his eyes and he said, don't waste your whiskey on her. She has absolutely no tongue for it. And he said, oh, that's terrible. And my husband said, yeah, it was almost as if she claims I served her poison. The guy, his throat, and he's like, what did you have? What did you give her? And he said, I gave her a dram of Oban, and she choked it back and, spat it out. And he said, you did give her poison. You can't start somebody on that end of the spectrum who's never had brown spirits before, and certainly never had a whiskey before, and certainly never had a single malt scotch. So he said, just give me a second. And then he ran back to his little bar station in the library and brought over this beautiful display, which Diageo at the time, Diageo is like a big drinks conglomerate. They own everybody.
They own Oban.
What was that?
They own Oban.
Yeah, they own a lot. I think now over 100 different single malts.
Was this the classic malt selection?
It was a classic malt selection, yes. And so they had started this back in, I think, the late 80s, where because they had so many different distilleries in different areas, different regions of Scotland, they were trying to market to a lot of tourists. I think it was mainly geared toward tourists, to sort of give people a flavor of, all the different regions of Scotland. Now, I don't think that we can say that that's an accurate depiction of Scotland any longer, or even any place on the earth any longer, because terroir is not necessarily indicative of where a grain is grown, might be shipped someplace else. So like Scottish distilleries might not be growing their barley in Scotland anymore. They might be getting it from the Ukraine or from Canada or from the United States. So you can't necessarily say that a distillery tastes any longer of the soil, the patch of earth that it lives on, unless they are purposefully doing something in order to bring about that flavor. But this was Diageo's way of saying, look, these are all the classic malts of Scotland. This is going to give you the flavor of every single region. And so it was, the Speysides, the Lowlands, the Highlands, the Islands, and Campbelltown. And the barkeep said, you gave her an Oban, which is Highland, on the scale of 1 through 6, that's number 5. You can't do that. You have to start way on the low end, the Lowlands note. So the notes that are cereal based and biscuity and floral and heathery, things that are going to be evocative to an untrained tongue and be, not so brutal and sharp. So he gave me what he called a lady's malt, which was at the time, I think it was Glenkinchie. And he described it in such a way that he made it sound like some sort of girly cosmopolitan dessert drink. And I'm like, does this have an umbrella that it comes with it? It doesn't sound like what I'm anticipating. It's like, it's creamy, it's biscuity. You're going to fall in love with it. And he's like, take some in your mouth, swirl it all around, let it sit there for a little bit, and then swallow, and let all those aroma compounds just kind of fill your head and fill your nose and fill your throat. And I took that first sip, and I remember thinking, holy hell, this was not what I was expecting. This didn't taste at all like that, really, really sharp, acidic, very, smoky, and a tinge of peat that Oban had. It was very, very different. So it happened to be at that moment I had been traveling for the past week or two around Scotland, and all of these pictures and these experiences and the history and the culture, the mythology that I was starting to hear about were starting to implant themselves, and I was attaching them to these beginning drinks that I was having. And that moment was really revelatory for me, where I thought, I might have been wrong. It was kind of a sharp realization that I might have actually judged something way too quickly just because I painted it all with one brush. So that was my very, very first taste and my first experience with whiskey.
What kind of drinker were you before? Wine, beer?
I was very much a rule follower while I was growing up, which was, and also I also had a lot of handlers because I was in the entertainment business. We just weren't allowed, people were putting money into my career. And so managers and agents, they're like, you'll not touch liquor. You're going to stay away from it because you lose your head. And then, next thing, 9 months later, you're pregnant. We've lost your album, that sort of thing. So
wow.
Okay.
Harsh.
So they kept you away from Johnny Fontaine.
Yeah.
No Johnny Fontaine.
No,
you don't
Johnny
want to be
Fontaine,
You don't want to be a Joey Heatherton when you're done.
There were no fountains. There was no funtains. There was nothing fun. It was all work and no play. And so when I married at a very, very early age of like 22, I had no experience at all. And this husband of mine, who is still British, he was desperate to create, some sort of like Bond girl. I know that he was hoping for the perfect wife, the absolute antithesis of just this woman who would be his bling, who would be highly educated because he of course was going to educate me, and I would be extraordinarily just reformed, very, very a very posh woman who knew her wines, who knew her spirits, who knew how to host a dinner party, how to say the right thing in the wrong moment. Just all sorts of things that I had never grown up with. There was a whole different lifestyle and a very different world than mine. So in the very beginning ages, I was just a blank canvas, and I think he enjoyed painting on that.
Well, it ultimately it's gotten you to this point, right? You've gotten this wonderful background now from that horrible Oban to. Are
you telling me, Aaron, that I owe him a debt of gratitude?
I'm not going to say anything about legal.
3-hour dinners sound pretty good to me, though. I'm just saying. Let's start in the library with a couple of drinks. I'm okay with that.
There were a lot of parts of that did not suck. Yeah, I did not complain about all of it.
Scotland really became this like focal point for you. It feels like from the book, it feels like from the way you discuss it here, that it's a terroir for you in terms of it's this germination point for you of where it all comes from.
Embarrassingly so, yes, to the point that I have no background, no family history with Scotland whatsoever. I'm Polish, and mostly we're apologetic for that at times. But I would, it's not like I ever wanted to be Scottish, or I just got off an airplane in Glasgow and I stepped into a world that suddenly felt like it belonged to me in a very, very weird and witchy kind of way. And I just remember every place that I went, I started noticing these odd emotions that I had never connected to before, like I felt like I had been here before, like I'd lived a million times in this village or on this island, or with these people, or I'd heard these stories in these pubs 1,000 times before, and I knew how they ended, and I couldn't wait to hear them all again from the people who I'd never met but felt like I knew. And perhaps there was just something similar to a lot of the Scotsmen and women that I was meeting that resonated with a sort of Midwestern kind of charm or affability or neighborliness, or the thing that I loved so much about so many of them that I met was they shared the same sense of humor as the people that I knew growing up, which were hardworking dour farmers from Wisconsin whose senses of humor were very subtle and very snarky, and sometimes led you astray. And that's that's the stuff that I loved about so many of the people from Scotland that I met. They all had stories, all had wonderful yarns to spin, and if they could reel you in with their stories, then they'd somehow, often try, more times than not, they would try to convince you that you were going down one path, when in actuality, the great ending of the story was so far from what it is that they were leading you to believe. And I love that kind of that kind of artful storytelling. I just think that their way of being able to set up and spin a yarn is very enticing. So there were myriad things that just enticed me about the land, and it was hard for me to go back and forth to America and go to America and try to explain to people why I felt like I was a little depressed stepping back onto my own patriotic soil, and I just was dreaming for the moment that I was going to be back in Scotland.
We talk a lot here about how drinking, the art of drinking, the beauty of drinking is when you're with people in a certain place, or maybe not with people. And whether you're in a pub on Isla, or whether you're at in Angelo's basement, or Mike's backyard, or my backyard, or you're at the local watering hole, it's about place, and it makes that whiskey better. And I get the sense that that's really important in your journey, that where you're drinking is almost more important than what you're drinking.
I agree. I mean, you couldn't have said it any better. I think that. Good night.
Yeah, Aaron's done now. Cut him off.
Scene, right? Yes. So the more often than not, I mean, I'm sure we've all had an experience. Well, maybe not everybody, but certainly I've had this scenario repeated countless times for myself, where I have been in a restaurant or at a wine dinner, and the sommelier is out there describing, or a winemaker is out there describing the beautiful wines that are accompanying the course after course, and turning to my husband and being like, we should get a bottle of this and have this at home. This is just, glug, 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 really, really amazing. And it's because of the storytellers, the winemakers, the craftsmen, the artists who are not only describing it, but creating the atmosphere, right? The food, all the time and planning that went into creating a beautiful meal, and the people that you surround yourself with at that table, the conversation that hopefully is as artful and interesting as the food and the wine or the spirits that you're drinking. And certainly, alcohol can play funny little tricks with our brains and make us have all those lovely hormones of serotonin, and just feeling like, God, this is just the bee's knees. And then you bring home a case or a bottle, and you open it up with Friday night pizza night, and you're like, oh my God, fathers, this is awful. This wasn't you're missing 99% of the puzzle.
Yeah.
But that has happened to me more times than I've had hot dinners, and I don't like to repeat that. But still, I cherish those moments where I have found camaraderie, and I found like-mindedness, and I found something that I want to, commemorate, just to keep that memory alive. But when it comes to actual whiskey, I think I've not made too many mistakes when it comes to finding a whiskey that has made an event thrive or made a conversation blossom. I find that somehow all of that is carried in the glass with it for the next time that I have it.
Now, with that in mind, you've generously sent some whiskey samples to us from your distillery, and you're going to walk us through a little tasting, which we have not done before on our show.
It's great fun. It's a class that I teach here at Reservoir. It's, one of the perks of working for a distillery is that you have access to so much whiskey and can send out samples like that to all of you. So yeah, there's a class that I teach, which is a 101 master class, which is just the nosing and tasting spirits. And it's great for anybody who's brand new to tasting spirits, to people who are super well versed in their drinking skills and whatnot, because what I have found is that usually everyone comes away having learned at least one or two new things that they want to apply or take with them for the next time that they are trying something new. So, when I first start the class and I tell people that, learning the art of whiskey nosing and tasting is a most pleasurable task that becomes even more agreeable by the fact that you have to practice it, right? So you have to do it over and over again. Practice makes perfect. And I think none of us are going to complain that we're going to have to practice whiskey nosing and tasting skills. But when we say the phrase nosing and tasting, a lot of people, they get a little bit nervous. They pull back and they're like, oh, you probably have to be born with that, right? I mean, that's like a skill that you're either born with or you aren't. They throw in the towel before they even have a chance to use it. And here's what I say to those people. Do you have a nose? Does it function fairly well? Air passes in and out of it. Can you tell when it's time to change the cat litter? Right? And if you've answered yes to these questions, then you too qualify as educable, and lessons last less time than it takes to make a sandwich. So what are these lessons? There are 4 of them. So the first one is eyeing the glass, and that involves color, viscosity, and clarity. The second one is nosing the glass. The third one is tasting the glass, and not so much tasting the glass as the contents within it. And then finally, the 4th lesson is the finish. And this is where we come up with all sorts of judgy terms that make us sound erudite and also scholarly. But so the first one we're going to do, lesson number 1, is eyeing the glass. Now we all have a glass, and hopefully you have something in it. And if you don't, definitely, I think it's a glass.
We have
wow, magic.
We didn't do our little thing. We need a cheers.
Hold on one sec, Shelley. We do this every show. Ange, lead our cheer.
Gentlemen, cheers.
Nostrovia.
Cheers.
That too.
Slancha. Yes.
Slancha.
Toast of your house. Okay,
should we pour all 3, by the way?
Should you pour off what?
Should we pour all 3 at the same time?
Oh, no, one at a time. One at a time is totally fine. So, with lesson number 1, we're using the wheat whiskey that I sent to you. And wheat tends to be used as a flavoring grain in a lot of whiskeys. It makes most whiskeys smoother. It's a really good entrance for people who aren't experienced in barrel-aged bourbons. And I always encourage people when they are trying a whiskey, a wheat whiskey for the first time, that they have it first before anything else, because the delicateness of a wheat whiskey, you'll get palate fatigue. It'll just knock out any kind of delicate profile for these lovely gentle gems, and if you put anything before it. So, all right, lesson number 1: color, viscosity, and clarity. We start with color first. So the color of a whiskey spans the spectrum from gin clear, that's a new make spirit or the distillate coming off the still, to a deep and beautiful treacle, right? So color can identify both the type of a cask that the spirit's been maturing in, and also the time spent in said cask. Now we have to remember that alcohol is a solvent, and therefore it leaches pigments and tannins from the wood. And that is, typically the longer a spirit resides in a cask, the deeper the hue derived from wood. Of course, there's another way that whiskeys can get their color and that is through the legal addition of spirit caramel, or E150A. Not all whiskeys are legally allowed to add that. There are certain classifications where you are not allowed to add any coloring, but certainly Scotland adds E150A to many of their scotches, and there are plenty of American whiskeys that have that as well. My distillery does not use that at all, so all of the color from our whiskeys, they're just all from the wood. It's really, really, really beautiful.
How old is the distillery?
We started in 2008. Reservoir started in 2008. Yeah.
And
so
how old are these typically?
These whiskeys are probably anywhere from 3 to 5 years old. It just depends on what cask size we've placed them in.
But these aren't single casks, though, right?
Some of them are. The ones that you have, I'm not sure. There's a good chance that you do have single cask. We're a small distillery, a small batch distillery, so everything. Everything is done by hand, from grain to glass. Every single thing, every barrel is tested for its readiness. So I would not be surprised if this barrel was ready and now it's bottled. That's how we do it. Okay. So the next thing that we're looking at is viscosity, and viscosity is just basically a measurement of a whiskey's thickness. So if you take your glass and you swirl it around and you coat the sides, then you watch the legs. Those are the drizzly bits that go from the rim all the way down back into the bowl. You can sometimes tell just a little bit something about your whiskey by watching those legs as they fall down. So some people believe that if those legs are slow, that may indicate that you have yourself an older whiskey. And if those legs are long and unbroken, that may indicate that you have a whiskey that's higher in alcohol. Now, this is a bit of a debatable statement. It's not been scientifically proven yet. We're still waiting for science to kind of catch up on that one. But that is what I was taught so many years ago by several different distillers. And what is a matter of fact piece of data is that viscosity, by looking at the viscosity of a whiskey, you can actually imagine that mouthfeel, so it's anticipatory. And I think that that's worthy. So then the last thing that we're looking at in the glass by eyeing the glass is clarity. Now, some distilleries are going to choose to chill filter their whiskeys, and this is simply a method that is utilized to remove any kind of residue that naturally occurs during the whiskey making process. And the argument against doing this is that by doing so, you are potentially stripping the whiskey of some very important flavor compounds. The congeners that are within that whiskey are aromatic and flavorful, and by stripping those away, you're losing taste, you're losing flavor. And why would we do that? So if you happen to come across a whiskey that is non-chill filtered and there is sediment on the bottom of the glass, or those little filaments that are showing up, wispy bits in the bottle, it's very, very easy to mitigate this if it's an issue for you. Chances are that whiskey is being held at colder than room temperature. So maybe it's because you have an ice cube inside your glass, and that might coagulate some of that sediment. Or the whiskey, the bottle itself has been held in something below like 68 degrees. You can warm up that bottle, or you can take out the ice cube and, cup the glass with your hands and warm it up a bit. Or if you have the bottle, a really easy way to get rid of it is just to shake it up. And then all of that sediment is going to redistribute itself back into solution. So it's not an issue. It's just a little bit of cloudiness. But, I think flavor, that's what we're after. So that's lesson number 1. And lesson number 2 is nosing. And if you want to move on to the bourbon, we can try that. Put that one in your glass. I have to take a sip of my... Oh, you're ready for bourbon. The long arm.
The magic of TV.
Please, sir, may I have some more?
Don't be stingy. Don't show form.
It's like Monty Python, I think.
What?
I want a giant foot coming in here. Okay, so yeah, this is our...
I want a Piranha. How about a Dinsdale Piranha?
Oh, and by the way, I wanted to tell you guys, the whiskeys that you're having, the wheat, the corn, and then the rye that's going to follow, these are all 100% single grains. Now, not a lot of distilleries do this. This is something that we choose to do for very specific reasons. But we feel like it's enormously satisfying for people to decide for themselves, what does that grain taste like on its own? And does that grain appeal to my palate? And after that, then you can play master blender. And we once had a mathematician formulate all of the different combinations with these, with the 100% single grain wheat and corn and rye, and put them all together. And I think the number was like an astronomical, 22 commas worth of figures. Wow. So you're never going to get bored, being able to do that. But it's really fun for people to learn about their own palate and say, oh, I didn't realize that I actually like the taste of wheat, or I definitely don't like the taste of rye, or I like if it's a wheated rye, or, vice versa. There's just lots of stuff that you can play with that way.
I mix them on the inside. I just drink them and then mix them inside. That's good.
That's good. He does the hokey pokey. He does 3 shots. He does the hokey pokey, and he made a blend.
You're so classy, Mike. Oh God,
he's the classiest.
Fit in so well with my family.
Is the grain all Virginia sourced, or is it from all over? Depends on where you go.
Yeah, no, it's another thing that Reservoir that really appeals to me about this job is that we try to create a whiskey that is the flavor of Virginia, right? We want to taste like the corn that's grown here, like the rye that's grown here, like the wheat that's grown here. And all of our grains are sourced within spitting distance of our distillery from farmers that we know and we love, and we've crafted these great relationships with. And we're absolute nuts about everything local, even to the point where we're cutting down trees in Virginia and we're using local coopers in order to create our own barrels, because we want the taste of Virginia wood to go with the Virginia grain and the Virginia water and the Virginia climate. So all of these things contribute to the flavor.
And it's outside of Richmond?
We're smack dab in the middle of Richmond.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. But 45 miles from here is farmland all around us.
Right.
And that is where our farmers are. So we're really close with all of those guys. Okay, so onto the bourbon. A lot of American whiskeys, specifically bourbons, they tend to be very oak forward, and they receive a large portion, anywhere between 50 to 80% of their flavor profile from the barrel. And that's, because we have to use brand new oak every time we are putting spirit into a barrel to put into our warehouse. That's how the TTB works. That's the Alcohol, Tobacco, Tax and Trade Bureau, which for anybody who's listening is unfamiliar with those guys. The TTB is a little bit, it's a government legislative body I can compare only to like the IRS. If the IRS had a really, really bad day and was looking to just kick a whole bunch of kids' sandcastles down, they make things really difficult for all of us. And there are a lot of hoops that we have to go through. But so lots of fresh oak chemistry is going into the flavor of bourbons. This one, yes, we're going to use with lesson number 2, which is nosing. So I always suggest to people when they are first tasting a brand new spirit, and it doesn't matter if it's brown spirits or any other spirit, that they find themselves a tulip-shaped glass. And thereafter, you can drink your spirit out of absolutely any kind of vessel that you want to. A sippy cup, a cocktail glass. You can just shove a straw right in the middle of the bottle. No judgment, right? But
crazy straw? Can we do a crazy straw?
Yeah, I'd like
crazy straw.
It's like a worm tube. It's like
a little bit of judgment.
Like
a little bit of judgment.
I promise you, I will not judge, but I will encourage a tulip-shaped glass. These are called Glencairn glasses. I'm sure lots of people who watch you guys already drink out of them. The one I have right now is a Copita, which is just a tiny, smaller version of that. They were nosing glasses that were used, years ago on the docks of England when they'd bring in the wine merchants would meet the shiploads of wine, and they'd go out with a small glass like this. And if it didn't pass the smell test, that guy had to leave port. So it doesn't matter, but a tulip-shaped glass is what really counts. The shape is important because it helps direct all those aromatic compounds straight up to your nose, through your nose, to a really important organ. It's actually my favorite part of my body. It's a tiny patch of tissue. It's about the size of a postage stamp, and it's called the olfactory epithelium. And it holds about 400 of your body's olfactory receptors. Now, I know 400 doesn't sound like a whole heck of a lot when we're, comparing ourselves to our canine or our feline friends. But when you think about all the singular aromatic compounds or the molecules in combination with one another, when they're combining and bonding, latching onto those receptors, we have a number of anywhere between 100 million and 1 trillion different odorants that our body can interpret. And that is nothing to sneeze at. But there are a lot of different ways that people will try to nose a whiskey. I've seen people try to insert their entire schnoz right into the glass, and that's fine. I see people who will hold it up to one side or the other and plug one side because they think one side of their nose is dominant. I always suggest when you're first starting that you pass it beneath your nose frequently and often, because the aromas that are inside your glass are going to release themselves one by one based on their volatility. And what happens is those most volatile molecules, they turn on a certain receptor, a neuroreceptor inside your brain, and that's the primary odorant it's focusing on. And so that's all you're going to get until those neuroreceptors grow fatigued, and then they're going to become muted. And that's where you have a chance with that repeated and often beneath your nose passing to get the secondary and the tertiary aroma. So we don't want to miss out on stuff like that. But I have a lot of people who come up to me and say, it doesn't matter which way I try to nose my whiskey, all I'm getting is a face full of alcoholic fume, and I don't like it. And so I have a really cool trick, which is to take a finger, hopefully it's clean. If it isn't, ask to borrow somebody else's, and dip it inside your whiskey, and then dab it onto the back of your hand, and then blow on it until that liquid has evaporated. And then you take a sniff or 2 or 3, and you will be absolutely amazed at the transformation, because you have now just evaporated that alcohol, and what is left are those aromatic compounds on your skin. So it's much, much easier for you to be able to identify some of all of those things.
Perfume, classy, and you can drink it.
Yeah. Well, this is just, what you do when you're first tasting something new. You don't have to do this every time that you're drinking a whiskey or anything. It's just, it can really enhance your experience. So what we're doing right now is by nosing that whiskey or your skin and trying to look at those aromatic compounds, you're asking yourself, what is it that I'm smelling, right? What is it that I'm identifying? Maybe it's sweet or, but you can't just say it's sweet because you're losing out. You say, like, what kind of sweet am I smelling? Is it sweet like flowers or like vanilla? Or maybe the dram that you happen to be nosing is smoky, but again, it's what kind of smoke? Is it tarry like, or burning rubber, or heathery? There's just so many different kinds of campfire, right? Just sort of drill down and ask yourself, what is it that you smell? But as human beings, we tend to make the mistake of not memorizing scents because we don't need to. And so when whatever it is that we are sniffing, when that object that we're smelling is absent, we get really frustrated. And so we end up using here in the distillery these guys, which are super, super helpful. They're Aroma Wheels and tasting wheels. And they're basically just meant to help jog your memory as to what it is that might be within that chemical compound makeup of that whiskey that you're smelling. So, with the bourbon, you're looking at all the floral notes and the fruit notes and the grain notes and the spices, the woods, where all the sweetness come from. And we can really just geek out with all of that stuff. It's a lot of fun to see what's inside your glass. What are you nosing inside your glass? So
Just
that
getting a lot of alcohol vapors. I'm really not getting anything else.
Hey, Shelley, by the way,
like, if you just wash in the whiskey, I bet you're probably going to get a lot more.
speaking of washing your whiskey, I just, you were talking about this rubbing it on the back of your hand and letting it just kind of. All right, Chanel number 5, Eau de Parfum spray, 1.7 ounces, $116.
I know.
This smells a lot better.
Way better.
Way better.
Way
Okay.
better.
Way better.
Have to tell that to our sales department.
I'm telling you.
And you can drink it.
Yes, you
And
can.
you can drink it.
This is perfume for the inside of your body.
And this is all natural.
It is 100% natural. You're right.
Oh.
All right. So if no questions with the nose, we will move on to lesson number 3.
The most important one.
Yes, the one that everybody waits for, and they tell me it takes too long to get to.
What do you got,
One
Mike?
quick question. You mentioned that you've barreled this and you're in cooperage or you're working with the cooper nose. How much does the char impart into the whiskey?
That's a really, really clever question, Mike. I'm so glad
He's
you
very
asked.
clever. That's why we bring him along.
Yes, the char is hugely important. You know, we know that a cask can contribute so much flavor. If you know anything about wood chemistry, which I assume most people do not, it's amazing to identify everything that a cask actually contributes to a whiskey. Now, you know, in the wine world, you don't char a cask, you toast a cask because the wine just doesn't hold up well to a char. In the whiskey world, we set those barrels on fire anywhere from 15 seconds of a number 1 char to the typical scale is 1 to 4. A 4 is like 55 seconds. We happen to utilize our coopers' artistic abilities to make them go a little higher to a char number 5 or 6. But there's a word of warning: not every single whiskey can benefit from such a high char. So you really have to know the spirit that's going to be going into that cask. Now, level 4 char is what's considered an alligator char, and above that would be the same. So you're burning the embers, you're burning the wood down to an ember where it actually embers up and it becomes shiny and it actually looks like an alligator skin because it crackles and everything like that. And the purpose for doing that is that you're creating more cracks, more wood surface for that spirit to seep into and gain access to the lignins, the cellulose, the hemicellulose. All those things have flavors that are being contributed. Those wood tannins and wood sugars are accessed. And of course, because you've modified it with heat, you've now also caramelized a lot of those chemical compounds. So there's, the vanillins that come out, cinnamon comes out, and clove comes out. It's truly mind-blowing to know just how much a cask and a charred cask will contribute to the flavor profile and aroma profile of a whiskey.
There was a certain island distiller that did that alligator char thing a few years back. That was pretty good.
Yeah.
Names.
Well,
This
we have
That one. Starts with an A.
Ardbeg. Yeah, Ardbeg. The Scottish distilleries typically use ex cooperage. So, when they're making theirs, whereas, American legislation states that if we're going to be making bourbon, we have to use brand new freshly charred oak casks or containers. So Scotland's whiskeys are not going to be impacted as much with that wood, that heaviness of the wood contribution. And, sometimes we will have UK customers who are awfully surprised at the amount of wood chemistry that lends itself to that flavor profile. So they're very different methods, but specifically meant to create a different kind of aroma and flavor profile. Okay, so the third one that you guys are tasting is our Reservoir Rye. Oh yeah. Oh,
By the way, extra points for the whiskey with a 5. We approve.
whiskey
We
with a
approve.
Oh,
50% ABV. We approve.
to open this one first. I can't
You
get
like
it open.
You don't get it back. Oh, I need
Tough
that.
crowd.
Yeah. All right. You pour. Okay, so we'll go on. Lesson number 3 is tasting, everybody's favorite. And that third whiskey that I sent you guys is the rye. So, most everyone knows that ryes are spicy spirits, right? So somebody who's searching for a broader, bigger, bolder flavor might seek out ryes. Interestingly, rye grains typically produce 40% less yield, and they are twice as expensive. I'm sure that's going to be going up any minute. But of course, that begs the question, as in, then why are you people making rye, right?
Because it's delicious, that's why.
Yes, right. Even though it's, the most fractious, the most labor intensive.
And it gets all sticky too when you're in the mash tun and stuff.
Yes, it gums up the mechanics of our machinery.
I've seen it happen. It's not fun.
It is not fun for the poor distillers or the guys who are the operators on the floor when they have to clean all that stuff up. It is. Yeah, it's no fun at all. But it is worth it when, the proof is in the pudding and you taste it and you think, good Lord, this is just so fabulous. It's such a beautiful, beautiful flavor. And tasting rye 100% on its own, just that grain, and from the patch of earth that our distillery is on, that just makes it really exciting. I think somehow that, ties into the emotional levity of that moment.
Do you use the same varietal of each grain for these whiskeys, or do you change it up every once in a while?
Well, this last year, again, really good question, because of not supply chain issues, but rather climate issues, we have had to search for other farmers who, just depending on where it is in the state, maybe some person's wheat or rye crop had a deficit of water or a lack of sunshine or something, happened and they didn't produce as much as we needed. So we had to search for other people. But, basically we are trying to go for the same kind of grain or a very, very similar, kind of grain. So depending on what it is. And Virginia only has so many that are available, although there are plenty of distilleries around America who are searching for heritage grains or ancient grains in order to create a very different or a long ago remembered kind of flavor that doesn't necessarily exist in great quantity today. And that can be very expensive. So
the bloody butcher corn, or
the rosen rye.
Exactly. A Boozie.
Westland
rye,
does that too.
Yeah.
There are some beautiful, beautiful grains out there. Sadly, because they're not in great quantity, they are very expensive to procure. And number two, it can be the yield can be affected as well. So as a distillery, we're always trying to balance. Can we, is it the flavor that's most important, or is it the yield that's most important? And trying to blend those two things together so that they're never out of balance, right? It's really important that we're thinking about all that. So if we're doing, lesson number 3 with taste, I do have to tell you, Dave Cutno, he's the owner and founder of Reservoir. He calls his rye the Adult Swim whiskey.
Swim whiskey?
I always like that. I think that's funny. So whiskey strength varies. I think that we all know typically a whiskey's proof is somewhere between 80 to 100, unless it's labeled as cask strength, in which case it's going to be labeled 100 to 130 plus proof. And that's really going to scrape the tartar off your teeth. And, if you're like me and aren't very fond of your dentist, it's a great way to just sort of avoid that, push that annual cleaning off for another couple of months. But a lot of people have heard the term proof, but they're not entirely sure how it applies to a whiskey or what it means in a spirit. And there's a great little story I tell about how proof is synonymous. The word proof is synonymous with the British Royal Navy. So as far back as like 1655, up until I think as recently as 1970, if I'm correct, the British Royal Navy used to give their sailors a daily tot of rum. And this happened once they ran out of beer and water. And, basically running out of beer, that just means that the ship pulled out of the parking lot. They're sailors. And the water ran out pretty quickly as well, because they were taking it from polluted sources like the Thames, or the water got rancid real fast on board the ship. So that daily tot of rum was something that those sailors counted on. And they also counted on the fact that it was going to be given to them at the promised strength that the government said they would receive. But, back before 1816, when the Sykes hydrometer was first discovered, and that's a piece of machinery that you use to measure the strength of a spirit, they didn't have a way to actually, concretely identify if each one of them got that strength. So they created a sort of an over-under method to measure it. So the sailors took a little bit of their rum and they took a little bit of gunpowder and they mixed them together and created a paste. And then they did what mothers of teenage boys all around the world fear most. They tried to light it on fire. And if that paste sparked or ignited, then they knew that they had, then it was above 57% ABV, or alcohol by volume. And if it did not spark or light, then that was obviously below. So here was the sailors' proof that they had the strength of whiskey or the strength of rum that they were promised. I just think it's such a cool little story. So all of these whiskeys that you fellas are trying are at 100 proof. And we do that specifically with these three because we like to think that, people should be able to play with the strength of their whiskey, right? You can always bring it down, but you can't raise it up. So we tend to go a little higher. And the industry standard for barrel filling is 125. But a cool thing that happens in the warehouse is that alcoholic strength, that proof, can either rise or fall, all because of a fancy schmancy sciencey term we call evaporation. So just before bottling, distillers typically add water to find out where they feel, that whiskey, that spirit shines most brightly. And, despite the fact that we choose 100 for these particular ones, distillers choose all different kinds of numbers, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to appeal to your palate, right? And in fact, it might just damage some of your receptors on your tongue. It's a process called chemstesis, which all of us have had happen to ourselves a million times before. That's where you have a chemical reaction to the receptors on your skin. So if you're a fan of spicy food and you've all tried, hot peppers, capsaicin creates a thermal reaction on your tongue. Or if you like menthol or wintergreen, peppermint, that creates a cooling sensation on those receptors. Or if you like soda pop, or anything carbonated, that creates a tingling sensation. So alcohol creates a prickling sensation on your tongue. That chemstesis is a prickling sensation. So if you feel after you've taken a first sip of your spirit that your tongue still prickles as the alcohol moves over it, feel free to play with it. And by play with it, I mean add water. Because, that chemstesis interferes with your ability to taste all the flavors that are within that glass that you happen to be drinking. And so if you are tasting, I always suggest to keep it in your mouth, swirl it all over the surfaces of your mouth, the sides of your cheeks, above the roof of your mouth, your tongue, beneath your tongue, and chew it a few times, to aerate it. Make sure that you're coating everything, and then swallow it. And you're asking yourself that same question as when you were nosing. You're identifying all the flavors. Here's your tongue and your nose working together in tandem with one another, where you're asking, okay, not only am I, getting all of the sweet, the sour, the salty, the bitter, the umami, but here you're actually blossoming. So the formula I used to explain to people is that scent plus taste equals flavor. The two of them in concert with one another broaden up this big, beautiful world we call flavor. And if you've been a sad recipient of the COVID plague and you've also experienced anosmia, it's a terrible, terrible thing to lose one or the other or both. Those sensory bits of our body are so, so important to us. And when they're gone, we're surprised at the lack of brilliance, right? So everything just sort of becomes monochrome and gray-like and really sad. But if you have both of them working, then you can, with a whiskey, you're getting the cereal notes or the sulfury notes or the woody and phenolic notes or the medicinal ones or the estery ones. We could just go on and on with a whole flavor profile, but it's exciting to ask yourself, what am I tasting? And in my classes, sometimes I'll have someone say, oh, I've got banana. And I say, you can't just have banana, because we all know that the flavor of a banana is based on the spectrum of time, right? So do you have a green, unripe banana, or a ripe banana, or an overripe banana, or a rotten banana, or a caramelized banana? So you can geek out and have as much fun as you want. It's up to you to drill down and discover everything that's inside your glass. And I think for the first time, it's really fun to do that so that you're not missing out.
And then we drink.
And then you drink. Yes, of course. I shall too.
Wait, we weren't supposed to be drinking?
No, you can be drinking the
I've been drinking.
No, the lessons are so much fun if you're drinking. Yeah, absolutely. And then the last one is the finish. And, if you want, you can do, with this one, you can do Dave's absolute favorite blend, which is he does 2 parts rye to 1 part wheat. It just totally knocks your socks off. It's a wheated rye. We actually sell this here in the distillery, but it's a lot of fun to blend that one. So terms to express a whiskey's finish are generally words like long or dry or chewy or fresh or clean or lingering, but I always tell people that you need to come up with your own vocabulary. And I would just hope that you'd stay away from words like yuck or horrid or awful. In which case, you've got to clean your glass or definitely find other hooch to drink. And then, the finish also refers to where and when the flavors appear. Is it the initial entry of your tongue or the mid palate or at the very, very end? And how long does everything last? Is it a short, punchy stop finish where, it's there and then it's gone? Or does that flavor evolve and linger long after you've even swallowed it and kind of, new things start to appear? So there we are. That's it. Those are the 4 lessons that I teach people here so that they can,
amazing.
Enjoy a little bit more. But it's not something you have to do every single time. Right?
So I'm part of a whiskey club here in Los Angeles, Southern California Whiskey Club. And we did 2 events, all by Zoom. It was a blind bourbon and rye event. And we didn't know what we were getting. And each time it was 20 different bourbons and ryes. And the second one was another 20 bourbons and ryes.
Wow.
And we rated, and we had no idea what they were. And we could taste them on our own before we got together on Zoom. And we were a sophisticated group. And most people couldn't tell the difference between bourbon and rye. I mean, on average. A couple people were better at choosing bourbon versus rye. Do you think most people can tell the difference?
Well, I think it really depends on the whiskey itself. If the distiller, a lot of American bourbon, that's tautologist, many bourbons that are made have a rye component added to the mash bill for extra flavor. So that can be a confusing component right there. Whereas, rye tends to have other cereals that are added to that mash bill too. And unless you're doing something where you're only having a single grain, it can be very confusing. That's again, one of the reasons that we try to train people on, this is what rye tastes like. This is what corn tastes like. This is what wheat tastes like or barley tastes like. And it can help with the memorization of recognizing it in a blend than later on. But even so, there's a lot of discrepancy as to how many different flavors a person can pick out, or how many different scents a person can pick out. And I think your average Joe is lucky to, maybe pull out 2 or 3 different flavors or aromas, versus, even the highly trained and skilled people who do it for a living all the time, every day. They can get stumped and stumble over things as well. So, I'm surrounded by hundreds of vials of little alcoholic bottles that are filled with scents in order to memorize and memorize and memorize. But when they're all together, it can be hugely confusing and overwhelming, just because when they're married together, they do kind of take on a whole new kind of complex aroma themselves. So I'm not surprised.
I really like the rye. It's really, really tasty.
Oh, I'm glad you do. Thank you.
Yeah.
It has won many awards. We're really happy with it.
They're all
It's
fun.
really good.
They all have a little bit of intensity to them, which is nice with the 50%. They're not shy.
They are rather bold. Even the gentle gem, the wheat, I think is something that comes out as buttery and savory. And one thing I definitely don't do when I'm teaching classes or we're working on crafting a new blend or something like that, I never give out tasting notes to people, because I think that they're all so biologically different. And when you have a room full of people and 90% of people are like, I'm getting coconut, and you aren't, it's not because you're not trying hard enough. Oftentimes, and more often than not, it's because there's a neuroreceptor that's just not turned on in your brain. And so that can happen to a lot of us. And nobody wants to make one person feel like the outlier and frustrated, and then they leave. They're like, well, this isn't for me. So therefore, this is one of the reasons I teach these 4 lessons, is for people themselves to identify, not to say to their neighbor, what are you getting? Or to read on the back of a bottle the tasting notes and be like, oh, this is what I'm supposed to get. You get what you get.
Question for you. Most unusual tasting note you've ever heard in a tasting?
Oh, hands down, that would be from Amroot, when they first, the Indian single malts that they were making, they were putting things like smoked kippers and, gasoline saddles and, stuff like that. I'm not sure if I like smoked kippers, but I didn't really find it that great as a tasting note. I shouldn't have read it before I actually tasted it.
Oh, no, I meant like in the class when you were holding a tasting. I guess, do people just give out personally what they had? I think what's the most unusual?
The most unusual I've ever heard somebody say was a urinal cake.
Ooh.
Yes, but if we actually think about a urinal cake, that was not necessarily a slight, because urinal cakes are actually things that are fragrant and meant to make a bad place smell better.
Wow, that's a good one.
Yeah, I like that one.
That person had a sexual affliction, is what it was.
There's that great Lefroy promotional video that they did a few years ago for that whole marketing campaign opinions.
Oh, yeah. That was good.
And they just gave random people a taste of Lefroy and 10. And, my grandmother's old socks, and, you got all kinds of things. And it was great. It was all over the place because people had never had it before.
There's a really, really great, one of my favorite stories about Lefroy is something that I tell people when they ask me about, we're from Virginia and we're making bourbons. Are you guys trying to make a Kentucky bourbon? And I use the story to explain to folks that, we're not a Kentucky bourbon maker. We don't make Kentucky bourbon. We don't make Tennessee whiskey, nor can we. Legislatively, those things are restricted to their, geographical state and whatnot. But that's not something that we're after either, because we're embracing, the terroir of our Virginia soil and our wood and water and climate and all that. But when people mistake or just erroneously believe that distilleries are trying to copy other mash bills or other flavor profiles, I always tell them the story of the malt mill. which maybe you have heard or maybe you haven't. So back in 1878, there was a guy by the name of Peter Mackey, and he took over the ownership and the management of Lagavulin. And so next to Lagavulin was a distillery called Laphroaig. And, they were making a very highly sought after whiskey, but Lagavulin, their neighbor, was selling it for them. So they had this arrangement for 60 years, and everybody was really happy until Laphroaig finally felt like they were ready to start selling their whiskey themselves. And, they wanted to dissolve the agreement. So, Peter Mackey just went postal after the courts ripped up that agreement, the contract between the two distilleries. And, because this was a hugely lucrative business for him. So what did he do? He built a dam and he blocked Laphroaig's water supply, and the production came to a halt. Now, after the courts, they shouted at Mackey and told him that he had to hand back the water. So, Mackey grabs his marbles and goes home, and he's plotting his next scheme, and that happened to be a takeover, one of many. He failed many times at trying to do that. So his next mustache twirling idea was to build a doppelganger of Laphroaig, right next to Laphroaig and right inside Lagavulin, right? He was going to shove these guys out of the market with an exact replica of their whiskey. And so he felt like he could do this because, he knew everything about the distillery. He knew their entire technical setup. He hired a coppersmith to complete replicas of the Laphroaig stills. And he created this brand new distillery inside his old distillery, and he called it Malt Mill. And then he hired Laphroaig's distiller to move over to the dark side and make the whiskey for them. And the result? He failed. He failed miserably. He didn't even come close to what Laphroaig tasted like. And, eventually Malt Mill was, in essence, it was absorbed by Lagavulin. But this story is just proof that no matter how hard you try, you cannot duplicate another whiskey. It is part science, it's part skill, and it's a bucket load of magic.
There are so many variables
Yes.
involved. It's impossible, I think. You can't. It's hard enough to do it within a distillery, let alone do it outside of a distillery, right?
Yes, it's really hard to make a really great whiskey because of all of those components. A lot of things have to go, in the right order, in the right place. You have to have some luck. You've got to have a lot of skill and people with persistence and know-how and education.
And that's the essence of blends. I mean, especially the large blends, right? They just homogenize stuff over such volume and scale that you get the same thing every time because it's over such a larger a line. There's just so much of it.
Is there something you wanted to add something to that?
No. I'm just not in agreement.
I think you have so many great stories, so many opinions. If you wanted to add something about blends.
No.
Opinions matter. Opinions are welcome.
Just because it's blended does not mean it's bad, right?
Absolutely not.
No, not at
There's
all.
a lot of talent that goes into making a blend.
Most definitely.
Especially what you're describing, that it is super, super hard to. Shelley's telling me to stick my head in. Hi.
Hello.
It is.
Thank
really
you for joining us.
Yes, thank you for having me.
Dave Cutno.
It's really hard. Like, think about like what Johnny Walker does and the amount
Most
that
definitely.
they produce, and that they can make something that's the same over and over again. That's impressive. It's just the same thing as Jack Daniels. You can get it anywhere in the world. It tastes the same. Like, how the fuck do they do that? Can I say that word on this podcast?
Sure, why not?
Hey,
It's
sure,
a
why
family
not?
show, right? But
We're on
it's-
after
Over and
11:30.
over.
What word? How? You can say the word how.
but that is stuff that we do here as well. We do blending as well here, and it's it is extraordinarily difficult. It might be harder than actually making stuff. So I always give when somebody talks about that and raises that awareness, I always give a nod of like, oh yeah, you're on it. So yeah.
Well,
just like-
I very good. Thank you, sir. Come back again sometime. I think of like a can of vegetables in the store, corn, beans. wherever you get that can of corn of whatever, name a brand, it's going to be the same whether you buy it in New York or Los Angeles or Canada. It pretty much is the same. They're doing exactly the same thing as a blender. They're using a recipe over such a large scale that it all evens out. So it's not easy. And when you're talking about alcohol, like Johnny Walker, which what Mike, how many components are in one of the Johnny Walkers? There's lots, right? And it's really difficult to keep it the same. You think on paper it's hard to keep it the same, but when you're doing it over a large volume, you can round out all the issues to get the same product in the end.
And, and what amazes me is they'll walk through the component distilleries, taste every barrel, and immediately say, this barrel's off. Not that it's bad. It's just we can't use it as one of the components because the wood's done something to it, or timing has done something. Where it was in the rack house has done something to it, where they need to go, and that becomes something that gets sold off to, Scotchmore Whiskey Society, or they bottle it as an independent bottling, or something goes somewhere else because they know I can't use this in the blend because it'll put the whole blend off.
Yeah.
And it just amazes me that the science and just the taster is so attuned to each barrel that they can just walk through and be like, yes, 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 no. Yes, 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 no. And I'd go through and just go, no, they're all bad. I'm taking them all with me.
Every barrel yields something different, right?
It does. It's amazing to me that they can actually be consistent in the first place, because when you're looking at the components and the variety within those components, so you've got the grain. So how was how was the growing season that year? Does the grain taste anywhere different because you didn't have the same amount of rain? You had different nutrients in the soil. Your grain, didn't sprout as well. It grew a different size. It has a different starch content, and then you moving on to like the water. Is the water changing within your municipal city? Have they added any kind of chemical compounds that might affect the flavoring for when you're bottling, or are you having an algae breakout, blue algae breakout within the municipal water supply? There are all sorts of things. The wood, right? How the trees that they cut down this year to be made into casks, how different are they within their chemical wood chemistry than they were 4 or 5 years ago? Just everything that contributes flavor. The yeast, right? We're all, as distillers, we are very, very proprietary with our yeasts, and how our yeasts add an enormous amount of flavor to our profiles. So we're trying to propagate the same yeasts time after time, because did you ferment longer? Did you ferment shorter? Was the temperature around the fermentation tanks changed? Did that yeast go in at the right strike temp in order to start, budding and whatnot? It's mind-blowing to think about the complexity of creating consistent batch after batch after batch. So yeah,
and let's be honest, really the only thing that's really wrong with Johnny Walker is that it's not 100% Kalila.
Do you know that a good portion of Kalila's whiskey all goes for blends? There's such a very, very small amount of them. Yes. That always breaks my heart. I just adore Kalila.
It's my favorite distillery.
Oh, it's
and
so good.
You can't get enough of the independent bottlings. They're just, they're so fun and delicious. And
so, that brings us to a question. I'd love to know, each one of you, your very first experiences with brown spirits, with a whiskey. When did you have it? Was it good or was it bad? And
wow,
well, I had my very first experience. Instead of Vic's Formula 44D, there was a handle of Irish whiskey or a large bottle of blackberry brandy under my parents' bathroom sink. And if you ever had the misfortune of being sick, you picked your poison. Literally, you picked your poison. And I went for the blackberry brandy for a long while because it was sweet. And then let me try this Irish whiskey. And, it knocked you right out, but I felt great the next day. Whatever was wrong with me was gone.
It's the first medicine. Yeah. Come on now.
I so remember my mom giving us Jack Daniels when we had a cold. Here, take a shot. Or like a toothache. Nope. Here, take a shot.
It's medicinal.
as a kid. Very medicinal. Yes, that was probably my first. After that, boy, I don't know when. My journey actually started when my son was of bar mitzvah age, and our synagogue requires us the family of the bar mitzvah, to donate 2 bottles of whiskey, or
Like your
spirit.
synagogue.
Yeah, and
I might find religion before this is over.
a friend of mine and I, our boys are the same age, and we kept going to services, taking our boys when they were like 11, 12 years old, and we kept seeing like Jack Daniels at every that was a donation every week almost, or Jameson, and we thought there's got to be something better, right? We really don't know what, but there's got to be something better. So that was the beginning, and it just snowballed. I don't remember the first, but I kind of remember Highland Park 16, maybe, or Lagville in 16, and a Highland Park. But I don't remember. I can't remember a first one. But yeah, this is not counting Southern Comfort back in college, right? Doesn't count. I'm assuming.
Yum.
Ange, what's yours?
I don't know. I mean, when I was, let's just say I wasn't of age, and we were allowed to get into the bars back in the day. So it was like maybe starting with like Doers and soda at a comedy club. But the first time I ever had like just a straight whiskeys, not as a mixer, was probably freshman, sophomore year in college. 3 of us polished off a bottle of Johnny Walker Black. So that was an interesting morning the next day. Followed it up with a Edmonds banana crunch cake and a pot of coffee while we worked. So that was good fun. So yeah, it started there, and then it's like with beer. Like the first Guinness I ever had, I was like 16, and I loved it from the first taste. I enjoyed it from the first drop, and then you were going back talking about the classic malts. Well, Johnny Walker used to do a tour around the States. I guess they were trying to build the brand a little bit. This is probably the late 90s.
Mm-hmm.
And they would go around and they would give you the component parts of Johnny Walker. And it would be, the Lagavulin, it would be Dalwhinnie, it would be a Talisker, and I think a Cardew. They give you those, and then they give you the Johnny Walker Red, the Johnny Walker Black, and maybe, the Gold or whatever it was. And I liked the Lagavulin from like the first taste. That one and Talisker were my 2 favorites.
Wow, that's impressive. That is impressive. There's such a romance about thinking that these flavors, specifically in Scotland, when we're looking at single malt scotches and whatnot, that they are based on their region and whatnot. I still find myself describing lowlands, in a very specific way, and Speysides with their flavor profile, like what the classic malts did. But so I can't think of too many distilleries, and I think there are around 130 now single malt distilleries in Scotland, or working distilleries in Scotland, that aren't doing some version of peat week.
Right.
So to say that that you're not going to have a Speyside that's ever been peated is an erroneous statement.
And that's what I was going to say. Like you take a Balvenie, which is from Speyside.
Balvenie. Yeah.
And then you try the peat week. I'm like, wow, this is definitely not the usual Balvenie.
Right. And again, when you're working with grains that aren't coming from your particular patch of earth, whether purposefully, it's just like an economic, financial reason, or because you just can't grow that stuff. It's not necessarily anymore about tasting the terroir of that distillery, but rather all the other components that go into creating something that has a very specific flavor profile. And that is, like, what is the distiller's preference? How does he make the cuts coming off the still? Or, what types of yeast are being used, and how long is the fermentation running? What is the still geometry? That's a big component that a lot of people geek out over. They really love to talk about the shape and size of the still, the length of the swan neck, the pitch of the line arm. All of these things, the kinds of condensers, are they worm tubes or are they, shell and tube? All that stuff actually contributes to that flavor profile. And it's not necessarily just where you're located. So I try really hard not to judge a distillery based on, oh, that's a Speyside. I don't drink Speysides. I do, but if I were to have that mindset.
Geeky question: Who made your stills?
Oh, our still is it's a beautiful old Armagnac still. It's a pot still, copper pot still, and it was made by an Austrian company called Cote, I believe. Is that right? Cote. But it's beautiful. A little dusty just at the moment because the guys just finished the second shift. But
Ange, is that the same company that did the ones for in Chicago? Yeah,
Yes.
Koval. Yeah,
Koval owns Kota, or Kota owns.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. We were there a couple years ago. Yeah.
Beautiful stills, big onion head on it. It's gorgeous.
Mike wasn't there. I'm so sorry. But Mike went to Scotland, so screw you bastard.
Well, we've talked whiskey a lot. Let's talk words and books and pages and paper. You got this new book out, and you've already had a couple books coming out. I guess it comes out next month, right?
It does.
Make it a double. And you've already had a couple other books out. Oh, look at that. Product placement by Mike. Very good, Mike.
You. Mike, extra whiskey for you.
Extra whiskey for Mike. He doesn't have enough. Don't go under his house.
You should give him an extra little.
Oh, he needs one of those.
I do.
He's got one on order from Taiwan. So talk a little bit about your writing history. Just give us a little snapshot, and then we'll talk about the new book coming out.
Yeah. So back when I transitioned from being a musician and singer on a stage to being a mother of very teeny tiny babies, I was one of those people who realized I could not competently do two things at once well. There are loads of people, women in particular, who are very capable of holding down, an entire ship worth of careers and raising a family. And everybody turns out mentally capable. They can balance their checkbooks. They pay their taxes. It's all just grand. I'm just not one of them. I have to focus on one thing. So I had to make a decision, and it was like career or kids. And kids were like, it's going to be us. So while raising them, recognized that I was just sort of leaking creativity in all different kinds of places. And it was coming out in my hair color and in the foods that I was making everybody eat. We ate foam food for an entire year because I'm like, hey, molecular gastronomy, that's what we're going to do. So, I had to find some sort of outlet. And as I was really, really into reading great stories to my children, not children's fairy tales, but Tolkien, I'm just we're going to use as many wonderful authors that you might not understand the words, but you're going to hear my voice and tell a story, and you're going to be enraptured with the antics of just how beautiful storytelling can be. I started thinking, I used to write lyrics for a living. That's just a story in very short order. Why not just expand it and make them into chapters? There you have a beginning, a middle, and an end. Pretty easy, right? So I started writing middle grade and young adult novels, historical novels, because I was really into history, and then humor and contemporary fiction and fantasy. I was forced to do fantasy by my publishers, who were like, hey, you have a 2-book deal. You're going to do your historical fiction because you love it, and then we're going to actually make you do something that will sell.
More dragons.
I'm like, I'm not a fantasy writer, and that you will be shortly. So it was a sharp learning curve for me, but I dove into it head first, and I had a lot of great mentors. And very much like my whiskey education, a lot of it was autodidactic, by just learning by doing, constantly failing and getting up, and failing and getting up, and being rejected, and finding where it was that I had my weaknesses, where stories were accepted and loved and approved, and then trying to recreate more and more of that stuff. So spinning tales just became part of my life. And I remember going to do my little stint at Bruichladdich when I was training, and I was with all the fellas, and there were only guys who were doing this with me, our training there. And one of the fellas, his wife he had said, oh, she's a published author. And at that point I had, written probably 4 books, but nothing had been published at that point. And I felt so small and so insignificant. And the entire time we were working together, he was talking about his wife and, all her publishing credits. And I kept thinking, this is never going to happen for me, right? I'm not good enough. I shouldn't be here doing this work with these guys who clearly knew so much more about whiskey than I did. And I should probably just give up on the whole publishing stuff because I haven't been trained properly. But the thing that saved me was just a doggedness of going after something that was exciting and thrilling and magnetic. And it was, my passion. Every day I woke up in the morning and I wanted to learn about whiskey and I wanted to write about whiskey. And so all of my children's books had whiskey in them. It just kept leaking out into the stories. It's hidden in there in so many different ways. I'm not even sure that all my publishers or editors know about it, but mom's the word. Anyway, so yeah, it's just the two seem to combine themselves so beautifully that eventually I kind of found out like, well, this is where the crossroads meet. This is what I'm good at, and this is where I can, make a living. So yes, finally, I've done the memoir of 25 years working and trying to thrive in the whiskey world, which is has not in the past been very receptive to women. But now, so things are, it's a giant ship and it takes a long time to kind of, move that guy in a different direction. But we see so many women now entering this field, and it's so much of a relief to finally have mentors, who are in the female gender position, because we seem to think of things in a slightly different perspective. And as much as I have always appreciated the perspective of all my mentors, they've all been men. And so I would really like to hear a slightly different perspective from the optics of someone else, seeing the same thing I was, and not just wondering, am I seeing things askew, or is it just because I am a woman who's seeing things from a female perspective? In any case, there.
It's funny. We talked to a lot of people. We've known a lot of people over the years in this industry, and it's become, I don't think we think about it much anymore. Right, guys? I mean, at the shows 10 years ago, it was mostly men, and the people in the industry were mostly men. And now I don't think we think about it much anymore. Right. We talk to women all the time, and from all different levels in the industry. It's just become the way it is, which is great. It should be.
It has been hard won for a lot of my gender. Just, there was a lot of mansplaining as I was going through the early years. We're talking over a 25-year period of time, and certainly during the first decade where I was pounding down distillery doors and asking to see equipment and somebody please explain to me the production value of this particular mechanism, and sit with me, can we talk about yeast or fermentation? And mostly the questions were, why are you interested in this? Why don't you go to the break room and make us all a cup of tea? It was not necessarily mean-spirited, but just befuddlement. A lot of people wondering why in the world I would be at all curious, to know how it was made. It was a job for a lot of those guys and not a passion. It's just the industry that was there, and they went to work and, they worked on the production room floor. So my asking questions about their job was sometimes things they couldn't answer because they didn't know themselves. And so I was persona non grata that way as well, by pointing out like, oh, I don't know. Am I supposed to know this? So
why do you do it that way? Because we've always done it that way.
Exactly. Right.
Why do you work here? Because my dad worked here.
And his dad worked here, and his dad worked here. It's the only job I can get.
So eventually, and certainly back in 20 some years ago, we didn't have the internet, so there wasn't a way to track women who were, trying to get themselves into this industry, whether they were successful or unsuccessful. But those who were starting a couple of decades ago, they didn't have a CV on LinkedIn in order to track them down and call them up and ask questions. But I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with the way that I was taught. I am forever grateful for all of my teachers who happen to have been men. But I am especially grateful to now be able to share this passion and excitement and the education with other people as well who are not men.
So your book you've done a lot of writing. Your website's got a lot of posts in it, and this is some of those are in the book, right? And it all kind of connects in a linear fashion to some extent of where you started, like the story you told us originally with your ex-husband, and to all different aspects, your journey across Scotland and distilleries. Give us a couple of highlights that you found that kind of resonate with you and you think others people that'll look at this book and say, hey, whiskey's a pretty fun place to be in.
Well, I don't know that my purpose is to convince people to do anything other than maybe take a step back from an opinion that they had in any subject matter in their life and give it a second thought. So I use whiskey as a bit of a vehicle to have people pause and give a tiny bit of consideration to something that they might have already formed a firm opinion on. So, today in our life, our very politically divided nation, not just divided politically, but we just have, you're on one team or another team for so many subject matters in our lives. And in a very divisive world, we can really dig our shoes in and say, this is how I feel. And this is how I'm going to always feel, without giving ourselves the opportunity to test the foundation upon which we stand so firmly. And because I did this to myself, not once, but twice, right? I did this first with Scotch, where I said, this is terrible. I will never have this touch my lips again. And then I walked into Reservoir because I was researching for another book that I was writing. And I wanted to make sure that I understood some more of the technical aspects of American whiskey making. And I came across Dave Cutno, and his question for me is, why are you here? And I said, well, I'm trying to do some research, but I must let you know up front that I don't like bourbon. I think it's really sweet. It just doesn't appeal to me at all. And he looked at me and said, well, you've just thrown down the gauntlet and I accept the challenge. And from that moment on, he paralleled the same thing that Barkeep did, which was to say, I think you're just making a judgment a little too quickly. Give yourself some more education from a different perspective and broaden your optics just a little bit. Maybe pull back the lens and take a 30,000 foot view from this subject matter and see if maybe somebody else's perspective or some other experience is going to alter your position. So for me, this book is really an opportunity to remind myself to be humble about those two very definitive things, those statements that I made so long ago and that are now no longer correct, and to encourage other people as well to use that sort of experience for themselves however they want to, and just be like, I'm not going to be so specific and determined and complete in my thinking. I'm going to leave room for error, leave room for exploration.
You have to try things 3 times. Is that what they tell kids? You have to try it 3 times before you can say you don't like it?
Oh, right. Yes, the parental rule.
After a drop on the floor.
And I really mean no.
Or basically eat it before I beat you. But that's another story. That was my growing up.
Mine was you'll get nothing and like it.
I think, Shelley, though, that the industry in general is adventurous And there are people, many people in this industry, distillers, blenders, all across the board, who will say to you, to anyone, that I'm always learning in this industry. I'm always getting something new when I go visit another distillery, when I visit a whiskey show, when I go to a tasting, when I take a class. There's constant education going on within the industry, which I think is a very healthy thing, right? And all those maybe preconceived notions that we have are constantly being thrown through a blender on lots of different topics within the whiskey world or spirits world, and even in new spirits as well. And I think your life has shown that you're representative of that. You've kind of you thought you didn't like something, you liked it. You thought you didn't like this, you liked it, or you liked parts of it. You liked the process. You liked all these little aspects of what this whiskey world is, and you've kind of regurgitated it, learned, and come out a better person, I assume, to some extent, right? I think we all have learned better along the way when we talk to someone like yourself. These notions are what you taught, walked us through with the tasting. We're always picking up something, right? And I think your book, on my first glance through it, is just, that's what it is.
Well, thank you.
I've learned nothing. I'm as dumb as when I started this.
And that's why he's in the bottom square.
Absolutely nothing. No, the one thing that you were kind enough to send us 3 bottles with 100% wheat, 100% corn, 100% rye, and Reservoir does a lot of experimentation. Can you go into some of the differences for some of the other products, particularly the Hollands that they've come up with, or maybe some of the caskings? Because I noticed there was a cognac cask and some other casks, which were limited time things, but to just describe some of that's going on.
I am so lucky to work with a group of people who are so innovative, and do not rest on their laurels. It would be really easy for us to just make those single grains and sell them and pay the bills. But there's something more than just being an operator here, right? Something more than just being the barrelman or being the distiller, and everybody wants to add a tiny bit of creativity as well. So because we also live in such a rich environment here in Virginia, where there are, just within our 9-block radius here around our distillery, we have 9 breweries, 3 cideries, a winery, and a meadery. And a lot of influence. We always tell people we have these open top fermenters, right? Where we have our yeasts, commercial yeast. We have our specific modified yeast that is specific to our distillery, our strain. And then we have wild yeasts that are coming from all these different places. So it's amazing to think about the impact from the breweries, from the winery, the meaderies, the cidery, with our open top fermenters. And also we have these windows that are open within our distillery. So there's a lot of wild yeast in the yeast rich environment that we have. So that adds specific flavor, but also we have use of these craftsmen and artisans who are within arm's length of us, who are also very, very creative and want to be like-minded in making something fun and doing a joint project. So we started with the Hollands series with a fellow who owned the largest whiskey bar in Virginia. And Mac came to us and said, I want you to recreate this 1960s dusty. I just can't get any more of it, and I'm really, really sad. And so we brought him into the distillery, and we had him test a bunch of horizontals and verticals, and then we created this mash bill for him. And it was decided that, we had it right, except there was one thing that was missing. We didn't have the barley component, because that's a grain that we use very infrequently if we're only doing like really weird projects, but it's not part of our regular lineup. And so we went to one of the local breweries. It was Ardent, right? Yeah, and asked them for one of their barrels, which was a stout barrel cask. We put that mash bill together, aged it, matured it, and then put it inside to finish for so many months inside that stout barrel cask. And we came out at the other end of it with exactly what this guy wanted with this flavor profile. It was perfect. And then we found out that not only he liked it, but like everybody liked it. So we started manufacturing that all the time. And then we built upon that Holland series by doing a milk stout finish, and also a rum cask finish, which is a Jamaican rum cask finish, which was really, really cool, called the Milkman. Blade Rummer. Milkman is the milk stout, and Blade Rummer is the Jamaican rum cask. So we've got those three as a series that we're always making as a blend and using finishing casks with our neighbors and their artistry. And we have a really cool red wine cask finish, which is it's called Maison de Couvray, which is just French for the copper house. And we took our 100% corn bourbon and we finished it in a bunch of Grand Cru, Burgundy Grand Cru casks, and that ended up being something that I think personally that's my favorite whiskey that we make here. And then we literally just finished a project and totally sold out of our cognac finished whiskey, which Dave and I were in, I think, London at a whiskey show a couple of years ago, and we were introduced by a couple of friends of ours to some cognac makers, and they're like, "You guys have similar distillation techniques. You guys work similarly with your processes. Maybe you should, consider doing something together." And so, for the next 7 months or so, Nick Vaughn and Dave Cutno and myself, we all spent hours and hours and weeks and months with the cognac makers, learning about their process and them learning about our process, and then sending samples back and forth so that we could marry. We were each going to exchange a cask, and they were going to finish their cognac in one of our whiskey casks, and we were going to finish our whiskey inside of one of their cognac casks. And we ended up having the same labels and, just different variety of information on them. That stuff sold out so fast. It was just wonderful. And it was great that it was so much appreciated by all of our audiences on both sides of the pond. But more than anything, again, it was the colleagues, the people that I worked with were so enthusiastic about it. And of course, learning from other people who have been doing their artistry, their craftsmanship for decades longer than I have or we have. We really learned a lot by generations of people. Yeah. So it's lots of fun to do those things. And it's something that keeps us, always churning up with new ideas and being like, Monday morning meeting. Hey guys, guess what? I met this person.
Ange, you wanted to talk about favorite whiskeys.
Oh yeah.
Do you have a favorite whiskey?
I think it's like it's all about mood. I mean, I guess I have go-tos. Like if there's like the pecking order. What you would go to first. So, I mean, if there's an Isla on the menu or an Isla is available, I'm probably going to go there first. But that doesn't mean I'm going to discount, a really good bourbon or a really good Irish whiskey or a really nice, Highland or a Speyside. So, but I mean, Isla is the top for me, and it's going to be, and it depends on which one. I mean, I think like Lefroy, Kalila, and maybe Kilhoman are like my three favorites. And then from there, it just kind of goes.
You can't go wrong on Isla.
No, you can't. You really can't. Whether it's a Bruichladdich or whether it's a Bunnahabhain or they're just all good. They're all really, really good.
And very shortly, Port Ellen.
Oh, that's true. That's
right. That's right. And our friends at the Whiskey Exchange have got a new distillery being built too, as well, on Isla, which has
Aaron,
a really unpronounceable name. Kalila is number one, maybe Ardbeg number two, Bercolotti, number 3. I'm all about Island peat as well. And you, Shelley, have a lot about peat and Isla in your book as well.
I do. Peat can be a very scary subject for a lot of people because
Mike,
because they categorize it again. They just sort of paint it with one brush when peat is actually a much more complex component to the flavor and aroma profiles than most people would know, because peat is not just one flavor or one scent. It's divided up as to where that peat is harvested from, and
it's different depending on where it came from.
Yeah,
all over the world.
They don't understand that, if you're talking about Isla, then it must just be the Isla peat, which is, medicinal iodine notes and, those very, very strong phenolic notes and whatnot. Whereas if you go up to the Orkneys, that's all heathery peat, right? And the heathery notes, we don't have that flavor or scent of heather here in America. So a lot of people are like, what does heather taste like or smell like? And heather has an unusual term. It's gentian to describe it, which is bittersweet, soil-like, musty, or dusty, or earthy,
Awesome.
or root vegetable. So trying to describe what heather is supposed to represent inside a whiskey, and certainly when you're burning heather as a vegetated peat source, and that can be difficult. And then you've got the Highlands as well, which that's going to be more lignin based, so a lot more smoky notes inside that peat. But I love peat. I want to be buried inside a basket full of peat. It's my favorite smell in the whole wide world. I love it.
Ditto. Yeah, there's nothing like walking into the kiln at Lafroig and
makes me so happy.
It's just
Irish
being
whiskey?
in a cloud of
Irish whiskey. I can't think of it right now.
The peated one. It's Connemara.
Connemara. There you go.
Connemara.
That is a very different kind of peat.
Yeah.
Very
I always get like a chocolatey kind of note from it. I don't know
Because
why.
that's more of the heathery flavors from Ireland as opposed to the vegetative flavor from
And
Scotland.
I mean, if you put them side by side with an Isla peat, they're completely different.
They are different.
They are completely different. But completely different.
That's why we need, for all of us educators to be out there explaining to people like, no, it's not that you don't like peat. You just haven't had the right kind of peat yet. Just wait till you try other peats.
Right.
That's why I really like
Mike,
Oban. I think Oban's really the best. I really like that more than anything.
That's your favorite. Yeah.
No, that was my first Scotch, and I had the same reaction as you. I thought, boy, Scotch is terrible. I'm glad I drink Irish whiskey. And
All right, so
now that we've been doing all these things with Angelo, he's dragged me kicking and screaming to Isla.
Kicking and screaming through the peat bog, as we say.
And he dragged me through a peat bog. I spent a night there once. It was unpleasant. But now I can certainly appreciate peated whiskey, which I couldn't before. And I really do enjoy Kalila. I think that's a really good whiskey.
Yeah.
It really is. Especially the society bottlings the scratch and dents that they come out with, where it didn't make what would have been in Kalila, but it's still a fantastic whiskey.
Actually, speaking of society, the Bowmores from the society are also.
we talk about Bowmores,
and I actually like the Bowmores from the society better than Bowmore. And,
absolutely.
They just the peat really rounds out the flavor now, and you can kind of appreciate what they were trying to do, and as opposed to before, where for me it was just one note and it was just so off-putting. I had my first glass of Scotch as an Oban, and a guy that we worked with, he actually put for like interests Scotch. So his boss hired him just because he had the nerve to put that on his resume as Scotch. So we were out at a work event, and I thought, well, this guy really knows his stuff. And I said, what would you get? And he got a glass of Oban. Oh, let me try this. And it was just awful, really just terrible.
Yeah.
Oh, you know what this means, Mike? We need to get some Oban and try it.
Really, and now because you've ruined me, I would like it.
Well,
I was very the soft flavors, very Ireland, a lot of Middleton, and then all the Glens. because they're softer. They're not so, they're more approachable, I guess. I believe in your book, you refer to some of them as gateways. It's more of a gateway to bring you in. And I just enjoy them more.
I think I remember a time, probably about 10 years ago, 15, maybe let's be generous and say 15 years ago, when I was still quite a know-it-all and was like, no Irish whiskey is coming onto any of my shelves, because they're triple distilled and they have no flavor. And, I went twice to Ireland and I go to all the distilleries and I'm like, I feel so uneducated. I feel like such a Neanderthal tongue because I can't taste your whiskey. I'm not getting the flavors. And there was one whiskey a guy in Dublin, a bartender in Dublin gave me, which was brand new at the time, and it was Yellow Spot. And he said, give this one a try. And then my next trip out to Ireland was the craft distillery boom, where suddenly, there were so many great young artisans who were doing pot still distilling and pot still distillation. They were doing double distillation and not triple. And I was starting to learn a little bit more about sophistication of flavor profiles. But I think that was when I was going through a phase of like, I'm just only going to drink things that taste like it is 100-year-old tree that's been burnt to a crisp and sunk beneath the ocean. And it's stayed there for 50 years. And then somebody dragged it back up and squeezed it out over a bottle. And that's what I'm going to drink.
That's a tasting note. That's a tasting note.
Well, that's a flavor profile. Boy, that's a flavor profile.
Wasn't
I'm
that
not with that anymore. Thankfully, I'm branching out and constantly being like, oh, let's try some Japanese whiskeys, which are also, based off of that Scotch flavor profile as whatnot. But the Indian whiskeys or Tasmanian whiskeys, there's just so many beautiful. One of my favorites is Macmira from Sweden. Theirs is very different.
Angela D'Orazio.
There's just so many great whiskeys in the world.
The master blender or the master distiller?
She's the master blender, I think.
Right.
From Macmira?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That is Angelo D'Orazio.
Yep.
Yeah. She's got the greatest name for a job title, which is Chief Nose Officer.
Right. Yeah.
I want to be her.
Spelled Knows. She knows it all.
And remember the brimstone from
that was good.
From Balcones, Chip's version. Yeah. The mistake.
That's a good
allegedly.
mistake, though.
That was a great mistake. Yeah. Yep. We like those heavily charred mistakes, burned to the crisp, right?
I do. I'm trying to think. Was it Buffalo Trace has like a char 7 on one of their whiskeys? I think it's a char 7, number 7 char in Buffalo Trace. Yeah, I've not tasted it, but I definitely want to.
I haven't tried that.
So they just age it in bags of ash? Is that what they just do?
Pretty much, yeah. Yes.
I'll try it once.
They use spent charcoal briquettes that were used to smoke ribs.
Kingsford. It's all Kingsford.
Oh, man.
The Kingsford blend.
Now we're talking.
Whiskey.
Speaking of food.
Yeah. Oh, that's right. Of course, because as those whiskeys are going through their charcoal filtering and whatnot, it's not that far off.
So, Shelley, on your website, you have a lot of recipes. Food recipes.
I do.
Yeah. You like to cook.
I do. My whole family are very competitive chefs, caterers, butchers. They're every time we're together, people are just like, elbowing one another out of the kitchen. My recipe's better and whatnot. I write about my brother in the book as being the chef that we hired for a Robert Burns night that we did at our home for a lot of people. And, he's a CIA trained chef. And I'm saying to him, hey, guess what you're going to make? You're going to take all the parts of sheep that no one wants anymore, and you're going to make this incredible dish and then put all this meat together inside a sheep's stomach, and we're going to serve it to all my friends, and they're going to love it. And he's just like, you are crazy. You're crazy. Now, in Wisconsin, we grew up eating nose to tail, but certainly in Virginia, with all the fancy friends that, I had at this particular time in my life, I did not think, and it certainly was not a fad at that point to do nose to tail, but I did not think most people would like it. So Steve created some fabulous dishes. We basically deconstructed haggis and then reconstructed haggis so that it would be palatable to people who'd never had sheep pluck before, or lung, or stomach and all that jazz. And it ended up being really, really good. But yeah, I love cooking. And Dave and I are going to, we're determined, we just did a new kitchen in our house, and we're going to create a YouTube show. And Dave is like a master at collecting all things cast iron. We cannot go down the street 50 yards without that man pulling off to the side of the road and being like, oh my God, did you just see that kettle? Did you see that pot? Did you see that? Name whatever piece of, kitchen equipment that is made of cast iron. So we're going to do a cooking kitchen show in our new kitchen, and we're going to call it Cast Irony.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah.
Dang, that's a good one. Damn.
Maybe you guys seem to be the first guests.
I can see the t-shirts already. Oh,
yeah.
man.
So there's
That's
a very old cooking show in the UK. A couple, Fanny Craddock and her husband, Johnny, and they're like 1970s, where, Fanny's like always coloring lipstick around the outside of her lips. Nothing was ever. And Johnny, her husband, was constantly soused during all of the shows, and he'd be like, I'm just going down to the basement to get another claret. He'd pretend to go down to the stairs. It was just such a bad show, but it was
show or a comedy show.
It was it was serious. She was a very serious chef, but he was the foil. So that's what we're going to try and recreate in Cast Irony.
I'm good at that.
Did you say cask or cast?
Cast.
Cast Irony.
So you do a whiskey version of it and call it cask with iron.
Yes, I like that too. We're okay. Noted.
Yeah, no, I'm writing it down.
Dude, a whiskey and food pairing show, cooking with whiskey.
The possibilities are endless. It's going to be awesome.
Wow, that's great.
Pairing cheese with whiskey. It's a thing. We've done it.
Yes, we do a lot of pairing of food with whiskeys here. Oh, it's just so much fun. So we'll have to have you on as our guests on the show at some point. It'll be really
Sign us up. We're in.
Okay.
They got SAG, right? So it's all first class.
That's right. Yes, that's right. Yes. Back to the distillery for a minute. So talk about your daily. What's your job? What do you do?
Drink.
It's a big, broad term.
She drinks.
Besides drink.
She drinks. She tells people to drink.
No, I create more problems for people than I think they wish they had. So my job is I wear a lot of different hats, as all of us do in this distillery, because there are so few of us working, even though it doesn't feel, there are like maybe 14, 15 people that we now have in the distillery, but the core group of individuals is, pretty tight. There's like 6 or 7 of us who are here doing all of the day-to-day grunt work and whatnot. And my job is to, I write the technical manuals for all of our equipment, which was really, really difficult for me to first do, because Dave was like, none of the equipment can have feelings and there's no dialogue. That was like really hard to be able to, not have all the production room floor equipment talking to one another, because I have to describe everything to all the people, the operators, what it is that you're using, how it is to use it, how it's applicable to the process of making whiskey and whatnot. So I had to learn a whole new skill. It wasn't novel writing, it was technical manual writing.
Technical writing is hard, yes.
It is very difficult. So, I learned that on the job as I was doing the job, but I learned from a lot of other people. I had other distillers help me. I looked at their old texts and whatnot from the 1970s.
And who was, tell them who your mentor was with
right,
that, because that's fucking incredible.
Yeah, so Dave Shurick is my mentor. I adore him. He was the master distiller for Woodford Reserve for a bazillion years. And, anytime I have any question, science related, production related, whatever it is, first thing I do is I call Dave. I'm like, I have a problem. I just want to run something past you. And then, I could see his eyes rolling over as he's like, oh God, another one, but he's so patient with me. He's so, so kind. And the book tour that we're going to be doing, he's going to be showing up for a couple events when we're in Louisville and whatnot, and being my conversation partner, which he thinks he's going to be asking me questions about the book. But in actuality, everybody's going to be coming in order to, listen to Dave Shurek talk. Well, I'm really excited about that. I'll be interviewing him.
Book tour. Where, when?
The book tour, all that stuff, those details are all going to be up on our website at reservoir.com. And we have it on all of our social, but it starts... what did I say?
Reservoir.
Oh, sorry, reservoirdistillery.com. Oops. Yes, very, very important. Reservoirdistillery.com has all that information. There'll be a page separate from my book with the book tour information on it. But we're in Kentucky, we're in Missouri, North Carolina, maybe Texas, up in DC and Baltimore, and
Tennessee's coming up.
Tennessee, quite possibly the UK, maybe, fingers crossed, towards the fall, Australia. So, a couple of different places. Maybe we might even get out to Aaron, to your side of the world.
Hello. Come on out.
Yeah.
No mention of Philadelphia, Mike. You hear this?
Philadelphia.
Philly always gets
Birthplace of liberty. Just saying.
Yeah, well,
I hear it's always sunny there.
I don't know about that.
Always.
It was today. We all have a sunny disposition too. Just watch tomorrow night's basketball game. You'll see.
So other stuff I do is I'm in charge of teaching the employees some of the things that they're doing that are related to our production. I teach all of our customers who come in who want to learn about whiskey. I create things like our flavor wheels, or I write all the copy for we have a giant book of knowledge where absolutely everything that is relevant to any distillery and the making and running of a distillery goes into that book. So that is constantly being updated. I go to, talk to people about whiskey. I do classes about Scotch, about, the science of smell and scent and aroma and flavor. And we've got all different kinds of classes that we teach: the history of whiskey, the history of bourbon. And then I also am on the team of special projects. So anytime we do a collaboration, whether it's something local or it's something that is, across many oceans worth of miles, then I'm usually collaborating that and initiating that relationship and then working with everybody. And then I create all these really awful, terrible experiments that I make Dave and our barrelman, our warehouse manager, go through in order to see what's going to happen if we age our whiskeys at 3 different levels in the warehouse, or what's going to happen to the humidity or the barometric pressure if we change this aspect, or what's going to happen if we do a slow proofing instead of quick proofing. Just always looking at or like what happens if we toast our staves instead of char our staves. There's just lots of things that I'm always asking for us to spend money on, and then little projects. And poor Dave has to pull the plug when he's like, "That's it. Don't walk into my office anymore and ask for some experiment."
But what is that if not covering our flanks from the standpoint of the risks that any distiller faces from the standpoint of what's the palate taint that could come in?
Right.
Like coming up with that stuff and making sure that doesn't happen to us. It's an unsung benefit that we have that's incredibly important. That we wouldn't be able to have any kind of maintenance quality control here without Shelley.
Yes, I do a bit of quality control, which again is not something that people here love me for, but it's a necessity that is instrumental in creating, a whiskey that's passable. So if a whiskey comes back to us, and it's happened a couple times where something has been returned, then the sleuth work starts to find where did that taint or that off note come from? And so I searched through the production room floor, through the maturation, through the warehouse, whatever it is, asking every single question, looking through the records. Where did we alter something? What was different here in order to create that different note or that different scent or flavor? And an example was just a few months ago, we had a guy send us back a bottle, and he said, there's a slightly weird scent to this bottle of whiskey. And I smelled it, and I too had this like, oh, that, to me, it smelled like beets or earth. And amazingly enough, coincidentally, I had just literally finished taking a course with Nancy Fraley, who is like the master of all noses in the whiskey industry here in America. And she put on a course that was all about faults in whiskeys, and where it is that you can find them in the production of that whiskey making. So this particular one, I'm like, oh my God, I have a box of all these fault aromas, and this is geosmin. This is beet and earth note, that soily kind of earthy note. That is the compound geosmin. So then it was, we test the water, we find out what happened in the warehouse. Did they use the right hose for, proofing the whiskey? And, what time of year was it? Well, it happened to be, in the height of August heat, and the municipal water supply had a blue algae outbreak at that particular time. And so that was our culprit coming into our proofing water. But after speaking with the guys who tested all the water, they said, there's a threshold for the human nose to detect that. And it's really rather high. Like, you have to be super, super sensitive to actually get that note. And if it falls below a certain threshold, then most of the human noses can detect it. Well, it was only a couple of us, so it wasn't like we had to do a recall. But it's stuff like that I'm like, okay, since we had this problem, we might have to consider during the super hot months of the summer, we might have to consider getting a different source of water, a private source of water, rather than relying on our municipal source in case it happens again. Those are expensive mistakes that, of course, we don't want to have ever duplicated.
Wow.
So that's what I do.
You do I cannot imagine your business card.
It says Shelley Sackier, witchery.
Does stuff.
It does stuff. I like that. That's even better. Does stuff.
And cool.
Have you guys? What's the wackiest barrel that you've tried to age something in? X barrel. Are you experimenting with any weird things? I mean, really weird things.
Pickle.
Would you say, Ange?
Are you going to mention it?
No.
No, you go for it. You're the one with all the weirdo shit.
Well, we've done some interesting things in like mead barrels. Some things didn't turn out well, and it ended up tasting like cat piss. But that was a general consensus. We're like, well, we're not going to make that one happen again. But the cool thing about this distillery is that we have all these different cask sizes that we play with, right? So we have 5 gallon, 10 gallon, 15, and then we move up to 53, which is the industrial standard, and then way up to 400 liters, all different kinds of cask sizes. And so usually when we're doing experiments, it's in very, very small casks. We do some fun stuff. Like Dave has a wonderful barrel, which has been in operation since the very beginning back in 2008, which is just called the Ghost, Gray Ghost. And it was sort of like every time he and his partner would finish a run and they had a little bit left over, they just dumped the rest into this barrel, and it became sort of like a Solera barrel. And then they just shove it in the back of the warehouse, and they forgot about it for years and years and years, and discovered it in one of these most miraculous moments of housekeeping, and then sold those bottles for a lot of money. And then people said, could you do this again and again? So that's what we, a happy accident. That's just one of the things that we have repeated and found great success with. But yeah, there are some we just won't repeat any longer because nobody wants to drink them.
It happens.
That's honest.
It's
Well,
innovation,
we cannot.
right? We're trying to be creative. We're trying to be innovative.
So this is what we watch when we drink. We talk TV and movies, and what we're drinking while we're watching and drinking. Hey, are you a TV person? Do you watch a lot of TV or movies?
I tend to watch more documentaries than I do any kind of television or movies, but that's not to say that I don't. And I know that this is, part of your program. So I did come prepared to share.
No one else is. That's amazing.
Yeah,
We're not even prepared. That's great.
I thought about this long and hard, and they are not up to date things, but they are definitely worthy. These two things that I want to suggest to the people who are your fan base and all of your friends who watch and trust you. But there's a great program which Dave has just introduced me to. He's like, have you actually watched Servant of the People? And
What is that? I've heard of this.
Yeah, I said, what is that? And he's like, it's Zelensky's past
Oh
series.
yeah, that's
Your
it.
list,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, right. It's on my list.
And I said, oh, wait, I didn't know that he did a series. And he's like, yeah, it's a series about him being a history teacher and going on some rant in his class where one of the students filmed him doing this rant about, the political corruption in Ukraine. And then he said, then it went viral, they put it on. And then suddenly it was this guy, the history teacher was like, they all wanted him for president. They voted him to become the next Ukrainian president. It was a fluke. It was a wild act of democratic fervor. And now we've got this, incredibly honest, straight as an arrow, Zelensky being the next Ukrainian president, desperately trying to get rid of the corruption and deal with all the massive spending. And, not only, are the people that are surrounded with him in his cabinet and whatnot giving me a hard time, but his family members are now being like, oh, this is fantastic. We're going to get so many perks by being, the president's family. And so he's just fighting it from all ends. But I think it's just such a remarkable thing to watch him as he, it's political satire, not at its absolute best, because there are other political satires that are, probably better than this. Like, Veep is far better, but it's still, he has these moments where he's visited by past characters, like Plutarch and Lincoln and Che Guevara, and they're all desperately trying to convince him of how he should run the country. And it's a bit Parks and Rec style as well, with its sense of enthusiasm that we can make this place better if we just try hard enough, right? And I like that. I find that very, very endearing. So if you guys haven't checked it out, it's on Netflix. You can see it there.
Yeah, it was on Aaron's list. I know we mentioned it last time.
It's on my list. Seasons 2 and 3, I think it just got dropped on Netflix. So yeah, got it. It's on my list.
And
Yes.
the music is really, really great too.
How far did they go back? Like when were they made? Like early 2010s?
2015 was when the first one came out.
Yeah, it's not that old.
When did he become president of Ukraine?
2 years ago?
18.
Wow. That's just an amazing story.
Life.
He was the one,
I think 20.
that Trump tried
Yeah.
to get the turn on Biden. So we're talking like 2016 did that happen.
I don't think it was that early. I thought
Wasn't
that
it?
was more like 2008.
No, I think that happened later, I think.
Yeah, like
But still,
it's
this is like less than 10 years ago, the whole story.
Yeah.
Life imitating art. Yeah.
And so the movie that I would suggest is, one of my, I love this movie. And if you haven't seen this one as well, this is so worth it. But this was done in 2012. It's called The Angel's Share. And it's a, you have seen it?
Yeah. Is that the one
we saw?
Go ahead.
Yeah, no, it's a terrific film.
That's great.
A bunch of hooligans in Glasgow. They're
Ken Loach film?
what was that?
Was it Ken Loach? Is that who directed it?
I can't recall. It was Paul Brannigan, who's the guy who starred in it. I can't recall who directed it, but
Okay. I'll look it up.
bunch of hooligans who are just barely escaping the law by the skin of their teeth. They're doing community service, and they create this this heist of a rare whiskey that they're planning on and on siphoning off and selling for great amounts of money. It's such a great story about, again, the human spirit and wanting to redeem yourself and wanting to do something right, and then falling back on your skills, your natural instincts, which might not necessarily be, something that everybody else wants you to, or that are going to keep you out of jail. But it's such a beautiful, fun film. I like it. I like the character development within it as well. And the people who play each of the parts are just grand.
Oh, and it was Ken Loach.
Ken Loach. Okay.
He's done a bunch of things like The Wind That Shakes the Barley.
Yes, that was so good. Oh.
He's been around for a long time. He's been a film, and he's a pretty serious filmmaker. So yeah, I saw it. It was really good. That was a fun movie. That was a lot of fun.
So that's about it. Other than that, I'm just looking at how-tos on YouTube, how to make anything better, how to learn anything better from people who have had more experience than I have. So not a whole heck of a lot of thrill. I mostly read, so, and not always.
It's a lot. That's okay. We're okay with reading. Boys, we'll go around the room real quick. Anything we're watching that we need to mention here?
Mike, go ahead.
Just saw the new Doctor Strange movie.
Oh, it's supposed to be
I
great.
have 2 teenage boys, so that's pretty much Marvel's everything. So the new Doctor Strange movie, it was really, really well done. Well done.
Haven't seen it yet. Let's see. Winning Time is done, and I thought that was just a blast. That was just a lot of fun. I don't know how historically accurate it was.
Not, but fun anyway.
But it was a good time. It was
not a documentary.
Not a documentary.
Not a documentary.
A fake-umentary.
Entertaining. Really, really good. Winning Time, first half of the final season of Better Call Saul is underway, which I absolutely love, and I'm rewatching the show, kind of going back, like when I get a chance to just kind of rewatching the whole thing. It's just so good, such a good show. And what else is going on? Oh, and then there is the 6-part miniseries on HBO. We Own This City, and I think it's based
I want
upon
to watch that.
police corruption in Baltimore.
Yep, in Baltimore.
It's by Dave Simon and George Pelicanos, both Baltimore, DC folks, crime writers. They wrote The Wire, all that good stuff. So that's kind of what I'm in the middle of right now.
Did they do Treme?
They did Treme also.
Right. No.
I didn't care for Treme. I think and we talked about this last time.
Yeah,
they're Baltimore guys, and I think they excel at Baltimore, DC story.
Right.
It's what they know. I mean, that's their home. They bring a little bit more authenticity to it. So
right,
it's all about the Western.
What was that?
It's all about the Western District.
Yeah. Right. You've seen this stuff?
Oh, come on. The Wire? It's the best show ever.
Omar coming.
It's all about the Western.
Omar.
Omar coming.
God rest his soul. So yeah, that's from it.
I just finished Ozark.
You finished it. Don't spoil it. I have 2 more to go.
I won't spoil it. Nope.
2 episodes to go.
And what else? I can't think of anything else. What else I watched lately? I mean, Winning Time 2, and I just started 2nd season of Tehran on Apple Plus, which I really enjoyed the first season. Israeli-Persian crime terrorist drama thing.
How's Glenn Close? I don't know if I got Glenn Close in this.
First episode, she's in it for like a half a second, and she's Glenn Close.
Okay. There you go.
There you go. She's Glenn Close.
So if you like Glenn Close, great.
Yeah, if you love Glenn Close, you'll love her in the first episode. I think that's all I've really been. I have to say Barry. Season 3, Season 2. I'm not sure where we're at on Barry. And it is so freaking funny and good on HBO. And Henry Winkler he's just a cherished American actor. And I love that he's getting his due late in life. He's not even Fonzie anymore. He's just Henry Winkler. And he's just
and we're coming full circle here because Happy Days was in Milwaukee.
Happy Days was in Milwaukee. That's right.
Right. A little bit of Wisconsin there.
It's all about Wisconsin. All roads point to Wisconsin.
That's right.
Can the man off the camera ask y'all a question really quick?
Yes.
Y'all are all about these shows. I'm so in Shelly's not in TV. I'm so into TV. But what do y'all think about? There's a couple of shows that are coming up that are starting to get hyped now. Do y'all talk about future shows or just ones that are?
Sure. Yes.
No, we love this.
Okay,
This is
okay.
what we are going to
I'm gonna
watch.
throw two at you just because they're right at the top of the stack for me. Obi-Wan Kenobi and the new Game of Thrones. What do y'all think? Because both those trailers just dropped.
So I saw the Game of Thrones trailer a couple days ago. I'm intrigued. My wife read all the books, and it was impossible to watch the show with her because she was critical of it. From hey, that didn't happen. Hey, that doesn't happen until book 4.
Yeah, it's actually bullshit the way they wrote the story. Because I'm like your wife. I read all the books, and I'm like, God damn it.
Yes.
Because they stopped, and then it changed. It's like, wow, fuck. And then there's a whole other thing that he wrote that's like, but yeah, there you go.
I'm not opposed to it. I mean, it's a money grab, but I'm not opposed to it. I'm okay with it.
Yeah. See, fantasy's not my genre. If you give me crime, you give me comedy, you give me a rom-com, I'm all over it. Fantasy, after a while, because my thing is, and I was giving this a little bit of thought. You know, you've got these magic folks and all this stuff, and you've got all this drama. You know what? Cast a spell, just end it, but then you don't have a story. It's like, come on, man. Like,
Release the dragons.
Exactly.
Release the dragons.
Just drop the ring into Mordor. Story's over. I don't need 9 hours of this.
I want 9 hours. I want 19 hours of it. I want the director's cut 47 hours, actually. I want the Lord of the Rings prequel thing or whatever the hell that's going to be too on Amazon.
I'm all about the Western District. That's what I'm all about.
You're all about.
You're all about.
What if they did a prequel to the Western District when Pimlico was actually a nice place to live?
What year was that?
How far back were they going to go?
1950s. I don't know.
1954.
I've actually been to Pimlico when I lived in DC forever ago and went to the Preakness. Holy shit. Like, the Wire's real. That place is crazy, yo.
Yeah. I mean, that was the point of it, right? I mean, that was the...
But it's also beautiful. Like, literally, the homes are beautiful. And they were built for, like, middle-class housing and whatnot, but they totally declined. Like, how did that happen? And it happened very quickly. It'd be an interesting story to see. So, we probably just came up with a story that we could like sell to Hollywood.
But
I mean,
you could say
the 50s.
Yeah, the highways. The highways are in decline. Once you put the highways in, people can live further away from DC, so they don't have to live there.
It's the story of every urban area in America. It's
talking about highways to get away, or is it a Robert Moses kind of thing where it's just segregated neighborhoods?
A bit of both. A bit of both.
It's a combination of factors. I mean, wasn't there a whole thing where they were talking about like post-war for like tax credits for GIs? It had to be new construction.
Yeah,
there wasn't a lot of new construction in the cities.
Yeah, so
that's right.
Be further away.
That's why they're suburbs.
They built all the suburbs, and once the suburbs were in, everyone you had what they call the white flight. People that had a car and a job
and got out of town.
Yeah,
right. Yes. It's money,
and it happened in every major city. And certain pockets of those cities became almost unlivable for 20 years, maybe more.
Until the last 20, where any city. I mean, look at like Portland, Oregon. If you look like 20 years ago, housing was nothing. You look now, $600,000-$700,000.
Yeah,
crazy.
Yeah,
absolutely crazy. Yeah. Philadelphia, my old neighborhood. My parents bought their house for $7,000 in 1968. It's probably, this house is going for like over $500,000.
Yeah,
I can't move back to my old neighborhood. It's hysterical.
Yeah.
So if you leave, you can't come back
because of the reputation.
I don't know.
A bit of both.
There's a lot. There's a lot of it.
Angelo is not welcome back there, and he couldn't.
Well, that's true. Yeah, that's probably.
That's good.
Banned on Zillow. He cannot even get on
I no
Zillow.
longer know a guy. I used to know a guy. I don't know any guys. I know this guy. I know that guy. He's no good.
You know everybody. You know everybody then.
There you go.
See, we morphed from whiskey to TV talk to socioeconomic realities of America.
And we've solved all the world's problems.
Look, there's only one thing.
Through
Money.
whiskey.
Period.
Money is all, and whiskey's more. That's my motto.
Yeah, I like whiskey. I like whiskey better.
We like whiskey. Shelley, we cannot thank you enough for coming on. This was really fun. We learned a lot, didn't we, guys?
Did.
We learned a
It's
lot.
been absolutely my pleasure. I think I've learned quite a bit myself, which is
I doubt
always-
that.
You know what we learned? We needed to road to Richmond. That's what we need. We need
Yeah, road trip.
I've learned that Mike has a really nicely cut lawn at the moment, and I probably could
and
use some
manicure.
services.
I have one Richmond story. Here's my one Richmond story in my life. The very first Walmart I ever went to was in Richmond, and that's my story. And I think I've only been to like 2 other ones, I think, in my life. Walmart doesn't like resonate with me too much, but
Yeah.
that was what.
There's so
was
much
it.
more here.
I'm sure there is.
Kmart
Richmond's
now.
not a highlight, huh? Oh, there's
There's a
Kmart.
Kmart and a
Wow.
Walgreens. You know,
You got a
we're
Costco?
really-
Got a Costco?
Sure, that's a little bit above our.
No Costco.
We
No,
were
I'm sure
murder
we've got-
capital of the country.
We were, yeah, that's true. We were murder capital of the country.
Really?
And the
We've held
Confederate
that
capital.
post for quite some time.
Yeah.
So
You also have a university there, right?
Yeah, we've got a university.
Yeah,
Yes,
university
Richmond
there.
University. And,
Maybe,
and,
maybe
uh,
talk about that and not the murder part.
VCU and Virginia Tech is, a little bit further down the
Tech,
road,
yeah.
but still, we've got lots of good school in here. We teach our kids good.
There's some
That's
learning,
A little
There's
bit
some
of
smarts
learning.
going on.
some educating.
Well, we wish you much luck with your new book.
Thank you.
Make it a
Absolutely.
double.
Thank you.
Make
Thank
it a
you.
double. On, was it Pegasus Books?
Yes, Pegasus.
Pegasus Books.
Simon and
Distributed-
Schuster
Simon
distributes it.
Schuster, the big
Mhm.
SNS. Yep.
Yeah, so it should be, widely available. Again, you can get it at reservoirdistillery.com or go to your local
Bookstore.
independent bookstore, your
Bookstore.
independent bookstores, because
Yep.
those guys need all of our love to keep afloat and whatnot. And books just feel good, right? They smell good, they feel good, they teach us all sorts
Yep.
of interesting things. And I really hope that all 3 of you make your way out to Richmond at some point. It would be awesome to host you here at
It'd be
Reservoir.
great. And where can we get Reservoir whiskey? Is it widely available across the country?
It is. So Dave, we have new markets that we're opening up in it all the time. So you rattle them off.
You can. So there's a couple of places out of DC that you can order almost nationwide for sure. Shelleys is a big one, but where we pretty much domestically ship is the Mid-Atlantic, Southeast, going out to Texas is about to open up pretty soon, and then also UK, Germany, and Australia as well too.
Yeah. So
Nice.
up and down the East Coast, we're definitely there. Kentucky, Tennessee, Atlanta. Georgia and Missouri. Just up through Maryland and DC.
Think the SEC football conference. That's where you can find us.
There you go.
Well, with the breakup of football, college football, it's hard to say what the conference is going to look like in a couple years. So you
Yeah.
might want to.
Well, you might have a couple of Pac-10 teams in there as well in the SEC.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. There'll probably some moving around here. Yes. Well, all the NCAA and congressional laws that are affecting college sports. Again, thank you guys. This has really been fun. We love your whiskey.
Don't
It was
go
really
just
fun to go
Shelley.
through it. Yeah. Stick around, guys. Guys, this was really been wonderful. Thank you. And Shelley, good luck with the book.
Thank you. Thank you
best
so
luck.
much.
Shall I roll the end credits?
I
Roll
think
the
we should roll
credits.
the end credits.
All right. Cheers, Shelley. Cheers, boys.
Cheers, boys.
Cheers.
Cheers, guys.